This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. I just, do you ever have a thought that once you've had it, you can't get it out of your head? Even though you probably should, because it's possibly not serious enough for the subject matter that you're contemplating, or not really helpful to the goal that you're pursuing. I just realised something that will... I don't know whether it'll ring any bells with you, but I have a terrible tendency. I hope I'm getting better with age. I think I'm mellowing in many ways, but I have a terrible tendency towards impatience when people end up on the programme who clearly don't know what they're talking about. I know. It flies in the face of traditional radio phone-in territory, but I think you'd agree that certainly in recent years we've been incredibly lucky with the quality and calibre of callers that we managed to attract to the show. The days of... And I still quite enjoy the occasional exercise in pulling the pants down of somebody who is persuaded that Brexit was a brilliant idea, or that Boris Johnson was a wonderful leader, or that Liz Truss was some sort of economic genius. But that's more sport, isn't it, than actual inquiry. And something just occurred to me as I was making my way down the stairs. If Eleanor, the producer of this programme, were to put through a caller on the question of Iran and the United States who sounded like Donald Trump, I would be gesticulating furiously through the glass that A, they should never have got on air, and B, I want them off air as quickly as possible. And he is the leader of the free world. He is the president of the United States of America. I mean, that's extraordinary, right? The notion that the man who has his finger hovering above the button, the metaphorical button, sounds like the worst kind of contributor. And by that, I mean the ones that sound incredibly confident but know nothing. We had one, didn't we, a couple of months ago, or a couple of weeks ago, who literally said it wasn't his job to have any evidence or facts to back up his extremely strong opinions. Do you remember? Was he in Maidstone? I've got an idea he was in Maidstone. I have very strong opinions. I said, oh, well, would you be able to explain to me where they come from? No, I'm not a professional. Why should I have to explain where my very strong opinions come? And you sort of sit here. Or I do, anyway, and I think you probably do as well, and you sort of give your head a bit of a shake, or indeed a bit of a wobble. And you think, how do you end up in that position? I don't know. Some of us probably run too far in the opposite direction. We overthink things. We overanalyze things. It was John Keats, I think, who wrote, "Oh, for a life of sensation rather than of thought." So the idea that you just sort of turn up like a toddler at every junction in your life and do whatever feels best. I'll do this, I'll do that, I don't care, I want a strong opinion, I don't know what... So, you know, it's a funny one, isn't it, to reflect upon the fact that this fella is actually going to be making a decision about whether or not the United States gets involved in another war in the Middle East. I should probably say that again. I mean, of course, I should probably remind you first that he's the bloke who said there would be no more wars. I can't remember whether he specified the Middle East, but the difficulty of analysing Donald Trump, of course, is that there is no... And there's nothing to analyse. It is like trying to nail jelly to a wall or herd cats. What was true on Monday morning won't be true at Monday lunchtime. That's something that he did yesterday. He could do the polar opposite tomorrow. So trying to actually work it out. Anyway, imagine if Eleanor were to put this fella through to the programme during a conversation about potential United States involvement in Israel's continuing attacks upon Iran, which, of course, Iran is retaliating to.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, you know, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Sorry, Donald in Washington, D.C. is on the line. We're having a conversation about whether or not the American government, whether or not the American president should get involved in the attacks upon Iran, with the lessons fresh in our mind of what happened in Iraq and what happened in Afghanistan. So, Donald in D.C., what would you like to say?
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know.
So, what?
I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
Yeah, if I could just pin you down on the question of what you would use as the rationale for deciding whether you do it or you don't?
I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble.
Fair enough, Donald. That's true. Iran has got a lot of trouble. They're dropping bombs on it like it was going out of fashion. How is that informing your thoughts?
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make...
And what are you using to inform those ideas? Make
the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah. Okay. 03456. Thanks for the call. Have a great day. Stay safe. 034. Why are you putting through people like that, Eleanor? Honestly, how many times have we had this conversation? They've got to have at least something sensible to say on the, or at least say, I mean, what is the golden rule of this program? I want to talk to people who know things I don't know. I want to talk to people who've got ideas that I haven't. I mean, how did this guy get through? I just can't. So there you go. Here we are. 9 minutes after 10 is the time. And of course, the key question will be about either the imminent involvement of the United States of America, something that remains extraordinarily unpopular with his own base, a simple fact that perhaps many people in the UK don't fully appreciate or don't fully understand, or whether or not the United Kingdom should get involved, because the front pages are divided today. Britain could support US to strike Iran from the air, and that's a very notional could in that headline. Britain is weighing up whether to provide the United States with military support in the event President Trump decides to bomb Iran. Do you think he will decide to bomb Iran? A genuine question. I mean, you've heard the fella. He hasn't got a clue. He doesn't even know what day it is. He could bomb it and not even notice. He could bomb it and then deny that he'd bombed it. He could bomb it and not know that he'd bombed. I'm not even exaggerating. But do you think he will? I mean, what is the question that you must always answer in order to establish what Donald Trump is likely to do? What would be best for him? It's often obvious. I'm going to pardon all the people who rampaged through the Capitol on January the 6th with murderous intent, directed even at my own vice president, because it will make me look better. And also, I'd quite like people minded to deploy violence in pursuit of my power to know that they'll get let off in the future. So you know sometimes what he's going to do, even in outwardly quite complicated circumstances. There's no doubt whatsoever about what he's going to do in those kind of circumstances. But here, what is best for that? I mean, that is the only question you need to answer. You can't. We can but speculate. But what would be best for Donald Trump? And if you want to get psychological about it and his sort of narcissistic self-image, what would make Donald Trump feel biggest in this context? I thought Simon's suggestion in the news bulletin there, Simon Marks, that he would quite like to be the president that stopped Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. But as we have mentioned a few times on this programme, Benjamin Netanyahu has been warning about the imminent arrival of a nuclear bomb in Tehran since 1992. So every president since 1992 could conceivably claim to have been the president that had stopped Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. What do you have with the... what do you have here when it comes to the reasons why he might do something? Does he care about the people of Iran? No. Does he care about the people of Israel? No. Does he care about the good opinion of Benjamin Netanyahu? I don't particularly think so. Does anybody have leverage? Can people bring things to bear upon him that would push him in one direction or another? No. What is he likely to do is a question that we cannot answer for the reasons that I touched upon at the beginning of the programme. Because if he got on air, he would sound like the worst kind of caller to the worst kind of phone-in programme. So we have no idea what he's going to do. Here's the question I have for you. If Britain got involved, what would that mean to you? If Britain got involved, I'm increasingly drawn to the theory, and it is only a theory, that part of Netanyahu's motivation here is perpetual war. We know that continuing atrocities in Gaza, continuing conflict in Gaza is the only way in which he can stay out of court and quite possibly stay out of jail. He needs a form of perpetual war in order to mould his own population into what he wants them to be. The hemorrhaging of international support for the widely regarded as a genocide now in Gaza, the hemorrhaging of international support, or at least an attempted genocide, the hemorrhaging of international support for that possibly prompted a decision to shift focus away from Gaza and into Iran. Harder, particularly, to come up with a better theory if you're just using Occam's razor, all the available facts. Why has he done this now? Because he says they're very close to getting a nuclear bomb. Okay, park that, because he's been doing that since 1992. So that's part of it. And that would surely pose a very different problem to the West and to the UK in particular than Gulf War II, when Tony Blair elected to march in lockstep with George W. Bush into Iraq to effectively finish what George W. Bush's father had started years previously. Who here thinks that was the right thing to do? Can you have two thoughts in your head at the same time? Can you think it was the right thing to do because you didn't know that there wouldn't be a plan for what to do afterwards? I think you can probably sustain that thought, can't you? But there isn't a plan for what to do afterwards here. So if Britain were to support a US strike on Iran from the air, what would that mean to you? I fear it would be disastrous on every imaginable level, and it is something that is entirely unnecessary for the United Kingdom to get involved with. You're back to the dodgy dossier, aren't you? You're back to the 45-minute warning. You're back to a decision to drop bombs on a Middle Eastern country, to potentially drop British bombs, although we wouldn't be providing that sort of support. Dropping bombs on a Middle Eastern country because enough of the population or the political class has been successfully persuaded that we face some sort of existential risk, even though there is absolutely no proof of it. That's another bit that's missing from the analysis, isn't it? I was a tiny bit silly yesterday when I joked about how Israeli intelligence was able, or Donald Trump was able to claim that he knew exactly where the Ayatollah was, what cellar, what subterranean lair he was lurking in. And if they were able to pinpoint the presence of a single human being, you think they'd be able to provide the proof that the nuclear bomb was just moments away from being produced. And that kind of proof might actually change the game. But in the context of Iraq, it didn't. They provided proof that turned out not to be proof at all. So there it is. Britain could support US to strike Iran from the air. Imagine that moment, if you would. The US military carrying out strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities along with other military and political targets. I may do it, I may not. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. But if they did, if the US military dropped missiles, fired missiles on Iran's nuclear facilities and other military and political targets, don't forget that would involve almost certainly civilian deaths as well, and the UK was complicit. Diego Garcia comes back into the news here. The joint UK-US base on the Chagos Islands would be a staging post for any US operations in Iran. We would need to give permission for Washington to do that. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers are often stationed at that base. I want you to tell me what that would mean. And we can do this in one or two ways. I am interested in what it would mean to you. Perhaps you are Iranian, you have Iranian family, you are Persian, you are somebody with family in the region. What would it mean to you for the UK to get involved in? Because this is the point about holding two thoughts in your head at the same time. You can wish for the overthrow of a theocracy like the Iranian regime, which has become more oppressive in recent years, the torture that is endemic, even amputations as a form of punishment. It's medieval. It's a little bit like waking up in 17th century London and looking at what the king will do to people who upset him. And you can also not want the United States to start blowing up buildings. You can also not want Israel to do to Iran what it continues to do to Gaza. More deaths in a food queue yesterday. I'll share the details of that with you later. So you don't need to be binary on this. You just need to be thoughtful. and tell me either what it means to you personally or what it would mean on a bigger scale. Imagine if we'd had a phone-in before Gulf War II and someone had rung in and said, no, we definitely shouldn't get involved because there's no real plan for what would happen to Iraq afterwards. And what you need to understand about the sectarian traditions in that region is that the vacuum created by the removal of Saddam Hussein would allow extremists to flourish. You would probably see the rise of an organisation that made Al-Qaeda look like pussycats. They might call themselves something like, I don't know, Islamic State. And they would wreak untold damage, not just upon the region, but far beyond. They'd be sponsoring suicide attacks in Western cities, in Western... Do you imagine if someone had rung in and said that? Why shouldn't we get involved in Iraq? Why shouldn't we avail ourselves of this opportunity to remove Saddam Hussein from the map? And then someone had rung in and said that. What would you have thought about them? I suppose it would depend on what they offered up by way of evidence or explanation, how clever, how informed they sounded. But they'd have been proved almost completely right by events. And here we are again. Could almost be the same front page. Scratch Iran, right Iraq. Britain could support US to strike Iraq from the air. What would it mean? To you, to the relevant countries, to the world, to the future? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10. On the 16th of September 2013, did Donald Trump tweet, I predict that President Obama will at some point attack Iran in order to save face, or did he not? I don't know. I don't know what I'll do. I may do that. I may do this. I wish I could do better impressions. Every now and then, I get William Hague right for about 6 words. I'm William Hague. And then it just falls apart again. Everybody sounds either Welsh or I don't know, from the other side of the world. I can't do impressions. It's a great show. I'll tell you who's brilliant at impressions. Matt Ford was on Full Disclosure recently. He's a genius, incredibly funny man anyway, but he's got that added dimension of being able to do the voices. He does the voices. But Trump, goodness me. I certainly wouldn't attempt an impression of Benjamin Netanyahu, but it is probably worth providing some documentary evidence of what I've been telling you for at least a week now about the claims that Iran is just moments away from becoming a nuclear power, moments away from having a nuclear bomb, and that's why we've got to go and kill loads of them and blow up loads of buildings. Shall we start in October of 1996?
The deadline for attaining this goal is getting extremely close. And Iran, by the way, is also outpacing Iraq in the development of ballistic missile systems that they hope will reach the eastern seaboard of the United States within 15 years.
10 years later?
Spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage.
That was 2012. This is 2015.
From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
Just
the foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. That would place a militant Islamic terror regime weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
That's 2015.
If not stopped,
this is 2025.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year. It could be within a few months.
I find that extraordinary. And someone got upset with me yesterday for the boy who cried wolf analogy. I can't remember who it was, but it works. Because it only works on one level. And that level is, eventually, the boy who cried wolf was telling the truth, and nobody believed him. Netanyahu doesn't seem to suffer from that fate. People apparently believed him in October 1996, September 2002, September 2012, March 2015, October 2015, and some people, including people who do what I do for a living, apparently believe him in June 2025. And you have to acknowledge it. It could be true. Seems unlikely, though. If it wasn't true then, and 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 it wasn't true then, is it going to be true? Is it likely to be true now? I do not know. But I do know this. It all feels a little bit familiar. Amir is in Harrow. Amir, what happens if America or Trump presses the button and we join in?
Morning, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
Very welcome.
I think it's going to be an absolute mess. To be honest, like you've said, what happened with Iraq, and I do have Iraqi friends. I am from Iran myself. I came here when I was around 5. Okay. So I still have a lot of relatives over there. With you, keep in touch. I do visit every now and then. And I think it's going to be devastating. I don't think we're going to achieve much other than, a lot of people dying, a lot of civilians, innocent people, as it's already happening.
Yes.
And again, like you said, there's going to be a power vacuum. In Iran, there's a lot of different ethnic groups that want to take over or want to have their own region. And it's going to be even worse than what happened in Iraq because it's a much bigger country with much more diverse ethnicities, if you know what I mean.
Well, I do know what you mean. So I suppose you're talking about factions. You're talking about different interests. They're not necessarily the sworn enemies of each other, are they? In the way that we've seen in other parts of the world, in the way that we saw in Yugoslavia. It doesn't have to be the Middle East, of course, where the collapse of a strong regime can lead to splinterings that nobody could fully predict. What's the worst that could happen in Iran?
The worst that can happen, obviously, is that each region would then want to separate themselves or be their own little country, because, you've got people, close to the borders of Afghanistan or the people close to the borders of Iraq. You got some Kurds, people like that. Or you got a bit of Turkish regions near Azerbaijan. I think that's the worst that can happen. But what I'm following, a lot of people who are actually living in Iran, they're saying that even if they don't like the regime, they don't want a foreign entity interfering in their matters.
I think that's the also, they've seen what it looks like to be, quote, liberated, end quotes, by the United States. And to be, quotes, liberated, end quotes, by Israel would probably be an even bloodier affair. So that's the point we miss, isn't it, with some two-dimensional analysis, is that we think that because the regime in Tehran is grim, therefore anything done to remove it is therefore justified and desired by the large majority of the population. But you can simultaneously hate the regime that you're living under and not want to be bombed by Israel or the United States of America. That doesn't seem complicated. That doesn't seem complicated to me.
No, and that's the case. A lot of the people just want to live their lives. And, a lot of their lives have become difficult through these sanctions, through these wars that are being created in the region.
Yeah.
And that's what puts a lot of hardship on a lot of people as well.
And that could, of course, see something spawned that bears comparison to the Islamic State or to Al-Qaeda or that resentment to the West, that more heavily involved the West is, the easier it is to portray the West as needing to be punished or needing to be hurt, and you can't quite see how anyone can look at what's happened post-Iraq and think we should do that again. And yet here we are. People are looking at what happened post-Iraq and thinking we should do that again. Thank you, Amir. Omar is in Cambridge. Omar, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. It's a pleasure to speak to you, one of the most decent journalists, in my opinion, in the industry.
That's very kind.
So, a real pleasure. To start with the war, as we've learned in a few occasions now in Iraq and Afghanistan and anything, it has absolutely nothing to do with the interest of our people here in Britain or in Europe or in the West or even in Iran. It's all about greed. It's all about oil and money and all that. This is what they after, and then they just use.
Who's they? Who? I mean, because America's not involved yet. But if it, go on.
The British government and the American government, if we really call them government, they placed there by the. They just, in my opinion, they just puppet and they do what they told.
Yeah, you need to go a little bit far. I mean, you're in danger of sounding a bit like Donald Trump, Omar. You need to go a little bit deeper than that, I'm afraid, because
let's go at the outcome of going into Iraq, for example.
Yes.
Okay, or let's go a little bit further back in history. Iran was a democratic country at some point when they elected the prime minister who was, and as an elected prime minister, he started working for the interest of the people of the country that elected him, Iran. And there's no conspiracy, there's no secret that the Brits and the American planned a coup in Iran that we all known about. We've seen the films about it, documentaries. So it is not a mad conspiracy. They planned a coup there. Why did they plan a coup if they are the leader, as you called them earlier, or called the U.S., the leader of the free world, who wants to spread democracy all over the world? They do not want to spread democracy. They want to fight democracy.
I'm not following, which I'm sure is my fault. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm prepared to carry the can for that. But we have gone right up to the news. So thank you, Omar. The question is, if the UK were to join the US or to support the US, I mean, there's a gradation of support as well. There's getting stuck in like we did in Iraq, or simply giving the US permission to use Diego Garcia as a base in the Indian Ocean from which to launch attacks on Iran. And maybe we've got a little bit more mileage on the question of what we think Trump is likely to do, because I've just had a thought that I should have had earlier and may throw everything into a slightly different perspective. I'll share it with you after the headlines with Thomas Watts.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:33, because of course there's two questions you can ask if you want to know what Donald Trump's going to do next. I completely forgot about the other one. So I mean, the first and most obvious is the sort of narcissistic lens through which he views the world. What makes me look better? What makes me look good to me? What makes me look good to me? It's weird, that. So I wouldn't read too much into the fact that people like Steve Bannon are saying that if he does join in the attacks upon Iran, then it will tear apart the administration. I wouldn't read too much into the fact that MAGA, or the Trump base, is quite heavily opposed to getting involved in another war in the Middle East. It will involve what Trump sees in his mirror. He certainly doesn't see what we see. If he did, he'd never leave the house. But the image, the self-image, what do I want to be? Simon Marks had a crack at that angle when he talked about wanting to be the president that stopped Iran getting a nuclear bomb. But of course, as we've established, that would be pretty hard to prove. And if it was provable, they could probably have proved it already. If they can know what deep dungeon the Ayatollah is currently hiding in, then they should be able to produce the evidence that the nuclear threat is imminent, a claim, of course, that Netanyahu has been making since 1992. So that's question number one. Question number two. I wonder whether this trumps question number one, if you pardon the pun. What would Vladimir Putin want him to do? He has never done anything on the world stage likely to upset Vladimir Putin. That's quite a sweeping statement. If you can think of proof that that's not correct, do remind me, and I'll happily share it. But certainly in the second term, and arguably in the first term, I can't think of anything that he has done that might have upset Vladimir Putin. Up to and including trying to humiliate Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. So what wins? It depends how much faith you've got in the compromat idea, doesn't it? It depends how much faith you've got in the theory that Putin has something on Trump, that he has leverage on Trump, some, footage or photographs taken during his trips to Moscow before he became a politician, or whatever else it may be. Then maybe I can't do anything that will upset Vladimir Putin becomes bigger than the narcissistic lens through which he views everything else. In fact, that is why he looks, I don't know if you've seen the body language, but whenever Putin is in the room, he looks like Dobby, the house elf from Harry Potter. As soon as Vladimir Putin appears, he turns into Dobby. So the rest of the time, he's marching around the place like, thinking he's the bee's knees. I nearly said something very inappropriate then. That was very close, thinking he's the bee's knees. As soon as Vladimir Putin turns up, who ironically enough looks a bit like Dobby, the house elf, but as soon as Vladimir Putin turns up, Donald Trump turns into Dobby. I find body language fascinating. The problem is it's not reliable because you may not be seeing all of it. The other bit of body language was at the parade on Saturday. I don't know if you saw that. Very rarely do I wish that we could do video footage. Very, very, very rarely do I find myself thinking, we'd be better on the telly with that. Because I can't describe to you what he looked like. The description I came up with is he looks like a boy who has gone to his own birthday party and someone else has blown out the candles on his cake. He looks like a harumph. A harumph is not a noun to describe anything. It's a noise, isn't it? It's an onomatopoeia, but he looks like a harumph. If Lewis Carroll or A.A. Milne were to describe Donald Trump. They describe him as a harumph. He looks like a harumph. He looks like a harumph made flesh. Harumph. Someone's blown out the candles on my cake. That's what he looked like at the parade that nobody turned up to. But the body language when Vladimir Putin walks into the room, you won't be able to unsee it now. Have a look at him when Putin's around. It's Dobby. He turns into a house elf. It's extraordinary to see. So I don't know which one wins. The narcissistic self-image or the craven sycophancy towards Vladimir Putin. That's why he doesn't know what he's going to do. Let's go back to that call from Donald in DC at the beginning of the show and listen to it again through the lens of Vladimir Putin hasn't given him his instructions yet.
You don't know that I'm going to even do it. You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war. Things change with war. It can go from one extreme to the other.
Maybe he's just waiting for the call. I don't know. And lots of you, stop reminding me that Nick Abbott does a great Donald Trump impression. All right? When I grow up, I want to be like Nick Abbott, but it's still a very long way off. So you don't need me to remind me that he is one of the masters of the art, one of the masters of the craft. And I heartily recommend that you listen to him this weekend. 10:39 is the time. We'll go back to the question of UK gets involved, US gets involved, UK get involved in Israel's attacks upon Iran. What would it mean? Gazel is in Mill Hill. Gazel, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning. Gazelle. James, nice to speak
Gazelle.
to you. No, James, I think there's a hidden agenda behind all this. America's not going to help Iran. America doesn't care about the freedom of Iranians. I think this is all about selling arms. I think it's all about the financial benefits both countries will gain from this. I'm an Iranian who have moved to the UK when I was 8. I've been brought up in this country. Last year, I came back to the UK because I lived with my husband in Iran for 3 years. And I was there during the Mahsa Amini revolution. I was one of the first women who protested and took off my hijab. I was caught on cameras, the AI cameras that everyone's talking about.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I'm just listening. Sorry.
Yeah, and my bank account was blocked. I was taken to court for not wearing a headscarf.
Were you? What was that like? Sorry, I am interrupting now. I wasn't before. What was that like? Can you tell me about that? We've got plenty of time.
So I'm a British Iranian who lived here most of my life, so everything was very new to me. The protesting, the guns in the street, I was very scared. And I was very strong. I said, I'm going to defend my women and I'm going to take my headscarf off. And photos of me were taken in shopping malls and it was passed on to the authorities. I received a court order and I was banned from leaving the country. I was taken to court. I was fined. I think it was around £20.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the money. It was the feeling of being labelled a criminal for not wearing my headscarf. Yes. And I was in the same category as thieves, rapists, murderers. It felt humiliating that I'm a very educated woman. I've worked so hard in my life. How can you label me like this? It reached to the point that I said to my husband, who was very successful in Iran, who had an amazing job, I said, I can't live here. I need to leave. So we both left and we came back to the UK. He's on a marital visa. Bear in mind, my husband's work is there. His family is there. And he's been living in the UK, trying to make a living in the UK because on marital visa, you have to work. And last night, I had a grown man crying in front of my eyes saying, in one night, I've become bankrupt and I've lost my family. So to think that America is going to help us, Israel is going to help us, it's an illusion. And the fact that our country is split into so many pieces, it breaks my heart.
Clearly.
It breaks my heart that I see my people supporting this attack. And they're so naive, James. They have no idea what's coming next. I try to educate them, but the problem is what the Islamic Republic has done is that they've taken so much from people that all they want to do is escape. They can't escape this and no one's going to save us. All we needed was extra time. Iranians just needed extra time. There was going to be another revolution and we were going to save ourselves. We didn't need anyone else to save us. And I know if America hits us, we are done. We're going to be worse than Iraq. We're going to be worse than Syria. There is no way we will survive this. There is no way Iran is going to stand up again. I want to give an analogy to your listeners, and maybe it'll make it easier for them to understand. Imagine I have an abusive father, and I live in a household where he hits my mum and he hits me every single day. I go and speak to my neighbor and I say to him that my father hits me every day. All I was doing, I was trying to find empathy. My neighbor burned my house down. My house is burnt down with my mum and my dad inside. He tried to save me, but he didn't. Now I have no home, I have no mum, I have no dad. The dad is Ayatollah. The mum is the people of Iran. And it's me who was trying to tell the world that we needed help, but we didn't need help from America. America is that neighbor that burned my house down.
I get it, and I do. And what you highlight perfectly is probably the overlooked ease with which you can hold the regime in Tehran in complete contempt and absolutely not want or welcome any intervention whatsoever from outside, and most specifically and most obviously from Israel and or the United States of America. I don't want to add to your burdens, Gazelle, but you sound like you've already, you think it's going to happen. You sound like you've already given up hope.
We have, because we're realistic. We know how this is going to end. We know the agenda behind this. My dad fought for Iran and Iraq war. My dad lost a limb in that war. He fled the country because of all the complications. The Iran and Iraq war was just about selling arms. And this is exactly what's happening today. Israel wants to take the world's attention from Gaza. America just wants to sell more arms. We know how this is going to go. No one's going to save us. No one cares about us. This is all about the financial benefit that all parties will gain from this. And United Kingdom will join them.
We shall see. I hope not. I hope you're wrong. I disagree with you on a couple of things, but I feel a bit inadequate, really, even beginning to debate. I think the big overarching issue here is Netanyahu's self-interest, as opposed to some of the support. If it does come from the United States, it will be motivated by commercial concerns. But I think this is different from Iraq because of Netanyahu's presence right in the middle of the story. That puts a different complexion on things for me. But I'm heartbroken to hear that you think it's a foregone conclusion. And you understand why I say I hope you're wrong. I hope.
Just like the caller that called in before, Iran is split in so many different parts, and we've got the Kurds, we've got the Turks. What the Islamic Revolution has done for the past 40 years is create a division between all these entities. And over the years, especially with the Kurds, they've pressurized the Kurds so much, or the Baluchs. They've done so much harm to them that there's so much revenge between these nations. And if a war is escalated, I think we're going to have an internal war. And that internal war is going to cause more collateral damage than what America's doing or what Israel's doing, because we're going to have our own people turning against us. And that is what's scary.
Yes, and history supports your pessimism, doesn't it? History enforces your pessimism. But again, and I know it sounds pathetic, I hope you're wrong. I mean, what a pathetic thing to say. But I do. And I'm sorry for what you and particularly your husband are currently going through. And I'm grateful that you were able to provide such a powerful insight into the realities of this on the actual ground, because there's a danger. There's always a danger, even those of us who like to think that we're, good people, of forgetting about the human impact, talking about the issues as if they were sort of academic subjects, rather as opposed to matters of life and death for living, breathing human beings, including ones on the other end of a phone line on a radio station in London.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:50 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I guess one angle that may be absent from our analysis, and we got one yesterday, although the call went a little bit off-piste towards the end. The people who would argue that any price is worth paying to topple the Ayatollah, to topple the regime in Tehran. The Guardian speak to a student activist in the east of the city this morning who makes the case very powerfully. Yes, 585 people were killed in the war till now, she says, but in 4 days of demonstration after Mahsa Amini's killing, almost 1,000 people were killed by the regime. Forgive me, that's a resident of Tehran in his 50s who took part in the 2022 protests and subscribes to the same view as this 24-year-old student activist who sort of sees this as an opportunity to get rid of the Islamic Republic, and that being something they could never do on their own. She told The Guardian via text yesterday, now someone from the outside is helping us. So you have large portions of the population bitterly opposed to the government, which is getting more repressive, despite the clips on YouTube of young women who aren't wearing headscarves. It is getting more repressive. There was a massive strike a fortnight ago because of the absolutely catastrophic economic situation. So, and then that splits. Some of that opposition to the regime would welcome anything that helped topple it, and some would, as our last caller, as Gazelle illustrated, some would be profoundly fearful of any intervention from outside succeeding in toppling the government because of the vacuum that it would create. A very different picture from the regime being overthrown from within. And of course, if you needed to point at precedents, you'd point at Libya, Afghanistan and Iraq first, countries that they, quote, liberated, end quotes, and then walked away from. Another contributor to this article says it's funny how they call this exporting democracy while they always have paralysed all the democratic institutions in those countries. That's a 26-year-old artist in West Tehran. 10:52 is the time. Rachel is in Wandsworth. Rachel, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Rachel.
So I am half Iranian. My father's Iranian. I was born in the UK, in Newcastle, where there are a lot of Iranians. And I live in London, just for context. And my concerns, if we were to support or join in this war, are threefold. The first is this. Obviously, the deaths that would occur because of the administration that we're talking about engaging in this war. So this is not like, I don't think you can compare Netanyahu and Trump to Bush and Blair. We've seen what's happened in Gaza. We've seen the way they go in. We see the way they indiscriminately bomb everywhere and anywhere. So I think the extent and the level of the deaths and fatalities would be so extreme and so disproportionate as to what they're trying to achieve.
And crucially, Iranians, despite having a heavily controlled media, they will have been watching quite a lot of footage of the starvation and the killing and the displacement in Gaza.
So it is a terrifying prospect that this is the administration at this time that would decide this is their mission. And of course, we can talk about the ulterior motives of Netanyahu, which are absolutely self-interest and nothing to do with liberating anyone. By the same token, my second point is we've seen what they did in Gaza. Obviously, Iran's a different country, a bigger country, but it has such a rich history and architecture. I personally have never been able to travel to Iran.
Okay.
I cannot travel to Iran as someone with an Iranian father. I have to have an Iranian passport, and I do not feel comfortable. I can't get a visa to travel there. I have to sort of declare myself as an Iranian citizen. If my mother was Iranian, it would be different. So I want there to be a time where I can travel to that country and I can see my heritage and I can see what is the most fantastically diverse and amazing country that just these places might not exist, these temples might not exist, these wonderful places. It's indiscriminate the way they bomb. So I think there's also for me a very personal fear that Iran will be erased in some way and many parts of the important parts will be erased. And the third concern I have is that I live in London. And if we decide to support, and how far does that support go, then obviously we open ourselves up. I don't think anyone in this country really wants to be at war. And certainly live in London, you feel particularly like, well, we would be the ones that will be targeted first. My son, who's 8, said to me yesterday on the way home, and I don't know where he'd heard about war, but he said, oh, if there's a World War III, I just really hope I'm on a train with my friends. And I said, what do you mean you're on a train with your friends? He thought he would have to be evacuated with other children.
Oh, my days.
And I said, oh, no, you would never be separated. No, we wouldn't. I mean, we'd go to Newcastle, obviously, but you would never be separated. But that's what he thought would happen.
Oh, bless him.
It's a real fear that why would we support something that does not come from a place of liberating people?
You manufacture consent. That's how it works.
That's how we've seen it.
We've all seen it many times, and we don't appear to have learnt many lessons from the past. But the way you manufacture it at the moment is twofold. I mean, the idea that you drop bombs because of headscarves seems to me to be fanciful, but that's one direction in which the rhetoric is going. And then the other is that Iran is about to, just as it has been since, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, in 1992, it's about to get its hands on a nuclear bomb. And this is where, I mean, the logic of the next bit of that plan eludes me. They would then drop a nuclear bomb on Israel, which is, not that far away from Iran and in possession of nuclear weapons that nobody's any doubt about. So, how does mutually assured destruction not apply to Iran in the way that it applies to every other nuclear power in the world?
And all of these excuses.
But that's how you manufacture consent. You can only manufacture consent if you don't ask the second question. If you say, well, they're going to drop a nuclear bomb on Israel, and you don't say, well, hang on a minute, Israel is a nuclear power. What happened to mutually assured destruction? What happened to the reason why, since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, no one has actually detonated a nuclear weapon on their enemies? Because they know what the response would be. How come Iran would somehow be... But you can't ask the second question if you're manufacturing consent. You just stick the first one on the front pages and you shout it into the microphones and you abuse people who are pointing out how stupid you are, and that's how you manufacture consent.
Well, that's been happening in Gaza, is people just pretending what's been happening and how it's self-defense and how there's things underneath hospitals. We can all just blindly pretend, and that's what I'm worried about. We'll blindly pretend there's a reason and we'll follow it, but to what end?
I asked Gazelle this question, or rather I pontificated that she'd already answered it, and she thinks the game is already up, as it were. Her pessimism was heartbreaking. I don't sense you're in quite the same space. I'm not, but unlike both of you, I don't have connections to Iran. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that this is going to happen.
There's definitely a shift. I have no close family left there. I do have family. It's a distant family and cousins, and I know that. In recent, I think about 6 months, a year ago, there were threats that, they saw things in the sky and, is Israel going to make an attack? And at that time, I remember someone saying, all the families that live there who've been there forever, like, don't be silly, we're not going anywhere. This time they've got in a car and they've driven in the night to Turkey. That's the difference. So there is a shift. There is a real sense of this is obviously a very different.
But they've been watching the footage from Gaza. I mean, you can't separate the two, can you? You mean if I'd been watching the footage from Gaza and the man who had attacked Gaza was now attacking me, I'd be on a Lime bike. I'd be on a pogo stick. I'd be on anything I could get my hands on to get out of Dodge.
It's a completely different scenario to if this had happened under Bush and Blair. Yeah. I'm not saying they did anything that was important at all. That.
Yes, of course. But I mean, there are many echoes and many parallels, but there are also some pretty profound differences.
Hugely. And I think that's the most terrifying aspect. In the hands of these two, we have no idea how far they'll go.
Yeah. So someone trying to keep himself out of court who's expressed deep desires to remove huge swathes of the population from that part of the world, and somebody who would struggle to tell you what day it is but doesn't seem to have any conscience whatsoever. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this constitutes a Blair Bush fan club, Rachel, from either of us, but you're right. There are parameters of normality that no longer exist. What a call. What an hour. Thank you to everybody who contributed. My instinct is that we should continue. I mean, if we are teetering on the brink of Gulf War 3, I suppose it would become known as. Let's hope that Rachel's little boy is wrong when he posits the possibility of World War 3. Then, of course, you can't not be. If your country gets involved, you are involved. Don't see the appetite for it here, but millions of people took to the streets of the United Kingdom to march against the last one we got involved in. Oh, my days. It is coming up to 11 o'clock.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Minutes after 11 is the time. We will move on to new territory. My apologies to everybody waiting to contribute to that conversation. Just by way of a small reminder of that last point made so powerfully by Rachel of how could Iranians, and some do, some would welcome regime change at almost any cost. But if you want to wonder why the experiences of Gaza may persuade many Iranians not to welcome intervention from Israel or the United States of America, then the fact that you probably don't know how many people in Gaza have been killed while queuing for food in the last 48 hours. I'm not going to turn it into a mawkish game and invite you to guess, but I am going to give you the figure before 11:15 today. How many people queuing for food? So, yeah, come and liberate us, please. Like you liberated Iraq and liberated Libya and liberated Afghanistan. Come and liberate us, please. 11 Palestinians seeking aid were among at least 33 killed by Israeli gunfire and strikes across Gaza on Wednesday. That is the report that thousands of people queuing for desperately needed food supplies on the main Salah al-Din road, where Israeli forces reportedly opened fire and launched several shells. Another 19 people were killed in 3 Israeli airstrikes in northern and southern Gaza, according to the Civil Defense Agency. 8 died when a home was hit in the Zaytuna area of Gaza City, and Israel has said that the strikes were operating to dismantle Hamas military capabilities in the territory. The Hamas-run health ministry said on Wednesday afternoon that at least 140 people had been killed over the previous 24 hours. So don't look over there, look over here. It's almost comical, the attention that we are turning, the story that we're turning our attention to next. Did you hear Chris Philp? It's such a weird name, Philp, isn't it? This isn't a criticism. It's not his fault what his name is, but it looks incomplete. It looks like it should be Phillips, or even Phelps. Or what's the one? We've got a bit of a Harry Potter theme going on today. Is it Filch? Is the caretaker in Harry Potter called Filch? So Donald Trump looks like Dobby whenever Vladimir Putin walks into the room. And Chris Philp sort of makes me think of Filch, the caretaker at Hogwarts. Philp. It's such a weird word, Philp. It's not just strange things to your mouth. Go on, say it out loud. Not if you're in a board meeting or something. You've got me on a little earpiece. Just say Philp. It's wrong. It's the wrong collect. It's like Scrabble tiles, randomly pulled from a bag. Philp. You need more vowels. Anyway, he started talking about Rwanda yesterday. That's another... No, stop analysing words in a ludicrous fashion. He started talking about Rwanda yesterday in PMQs. I don't know if you were listening. And I kind of did a double take. There were 2 things from the last... Well, 3 things, actually. From the last few years, except one of them is different from the other 2 because it is actually happening, on which large sums of money were spent. The first 2 were, I mean, relatively small amounts of money compared to the third one, but they have something in common. And what it is, the first 2, Rwanda, and can you think what the other one is? Involve large sums of money, or at least sums of money that strike you and me as large, being spent on absolutely nothing. So who wants to have a crack at remembering how much was spent on Boris Johnson's bridge? Do you remember Boris Johnson's bridge? The bridge that Boris Johnson wanted to build across the River Thames? It was called the Garden Bridge. By some people. Can anyone actually remember? Do you want to have a go? Plinth is a great word as well. You're right, John, but stop distracting me, please. I'm trying to launch a phone in. Can you remember how much was spent on Boris Johnson's bridge? Yeah, £53 million. Now, as we prove every day, there are a lot of people listening to this programme who aren't in London. They aren't even in the United Kingdom. So it's probably my job to tell them that there is no bridge. Do you know what we got for £53 million? Butt kiss. That's not an Ofcom word, is it, Eleanor? We can say butt kiss on the radio. Nothing, nada, nil, zip, zero. Absolutely nothing. £53 million. And we got absolutely nothing for it. When Chris Philp yesterday started referring to Rwanda as something that the current government had abandoned, he failed to mention that they spent, can you guess how much? On Rwanda, does anyone remember? So 53 million on the bridge, right? 43 of which was public money. 43 million came from the public's pocket. Imagine what you could do with that at the moment. Anyway, 43 million pounds spivved up the wall, to paraphrase Angela Rayner, paraphrasing Boris Johnson yesterday. Can you remember how much was spent on Rwanda? Do you want to have a crack at Rwanda? Yeah, 700, it's estimated, about £700 million spent on nothing. That's the bit where you So I've developed a habit in recent years of saying, perhaps I'm very naive, or I'm very naive. And I even do it here. I think, well, I don't know a lot about business. Maybe it's perfectly reasonable to spend £53 million on a big fat nothing. Maybe I don't know a lot about international deportations. Maybe it's normal. Maybe all the other countries have spent 700 million quid on nothing as well. 700 million quid, it's a drop in the ocean. It's barely a PPE contract for a Tory donor. So here's 700 million pounds. Da-de-da. As long as we're not spending it on immigrants, then nobody's going to care about it anyway. It's on a non-existent bridge. Yeah, that's absolutely fine, as long as no one's staying in a one-star hotel. 700 million quid on Rwanda? What was the money for? To deport people to Rwanda. How many went? None. What? Not yet. Well, some people did go, but they were volunteers. They weren't actually deported. They kind of just accepted an invitation. So when Chris Philp stood up yesterday and tried to pretend that it was something that shouldn't have been abandoned in the first place, do you not think he should have been required to point out that £700 million had already been spent on doing nothing? 53 million quid on a bridge, what never got built. Shall I break it down for you? 21.4 million quid on construction contracts. How do I get a construction contract that doesn't involve me having to construct something? That's the business I want to be in. This is it's not actually a dying art. It's probably the only corner of the media that's still got big muscly legs. But how do you get a contract like that? It's like a PPE contract for PPE that's useless. Do you have to be a Tory donor to get a construction contract that doesn't involve actually constructing anything? 9.5 million quid on designers. 1.7 million, here it comes, on Garden Bridge Trust executive salaries. 2 and a bit on legal costs. This all comes from Transport for London. And what did we get for it? Nothing at all. 700 million. I haven't got a breakdown of the Rwanda money. Feel free to send me one if you've got one to hand. We haven't even touched on test and trace, but you could at least understand what that was supposed to do. Here's 700 million quid on Rwanda. And now we come to the mothership. It's different from those two things because it is actually happening and you can already see it. And there is stuff that is that has been provided or delivered. But here we are. Can you guess what we're talking about? You can guess what we're talking about, right? Yeah. HS2. H, or H, as some people like to say, although I have to say the sound of the word H is like fingernails on a blackboard for me. H, A-I-T-C-H, is the letter H, H, H. It's turning into a Steps tribute act, this programme today. HS2. Who wants to have a crack at putting a figure on that? I shouldn't laugh, but some numbers are so big, you can't get your head around them, can you? You get your head around 53 million quid on a non-existent bridge? Yeah, just about. You could win that on Euro Millions, couldn't you? So we've all spent 53 million quid on our way back from the newsagent with a Euro Millions ticket in our back pocket. Well, I'll give my mum $1 million, I'll give my sister $1 million, I'll give everyone, then I'll buy Kidderminster Harrier. 700 million? Can you get your head around 700 million? Can you get your head around 700 million pounds? Yeah, it's like 10 Euro Millions. Of course you can. Yeah, 6 or 7 euro. Yeah, okay, just about get my head around 700 million pounds. It's roughly what Rishi Sunak is worth, isn't it? Or is that 70 million? You see what I mean? What's a zero? If you're worth 70 million or 700 million, and I'm not badly off, right? I earn a very good scratch. But I don't know the difference between 70 million and 700 million. What difference would it make? I think it's a difference between a yacht and not a yacht. Yacht and not yacht. You divide the world once you pass a certain threshold into yacht and not yacht. I'm very much not yacht. But you could have 70 million quid in the bank. The rest of the world would think you were rich as Croesus, but you'd be not yacht. You wouldn't be yacht. You'd be not yacht. So we can just about get our heads around 700 million quid. Although, I mean, what would you do if someone offered you 70 million quid or a 1 in 5 chance of getting 700? So they gave you a 10 to 1 roll on the 70. You'd keep the 70 million. No one's going to roll the dice on 70 million in order to get 700. I'd be more than happy with 70 million. I'll take the bridge. I'll take the 53 million for the bridge. You can keep the 700 million for the Rwanda scheme. What do you think they are estimating HS2 is going to cost now? The Transport Secretary did not confirm a new price for the project, which some suggest will top £100 billion. I was supposed to be £57 billion at 2019 prices, but it's going to come in now, it would seem, at approximately £100 billion, and it's going to come in late. So it was described yesterday by the new Transport Secretary, and again, this is something that they inherited, as an appalling mess. She described the high-speed rail project and its management as a, quote, litany of failure. She told the Commons that billions of pounds of taxpayers' money has been wasted by constant scope changes, ineffective contracts and bad management. And I don't know exactly what that means. It's a 7-year delay already on the original forecast. They will not be running in 2033, and she was unable to provide a date upon which they would be. There's a new chief executive who's come in. He's called Mark Wilde, appropriately enough, and his priority is building the rest of the railway safely at the lowest reasonable cost, even if this takes longer. And he is the fellow who's been looking into what happened previously. He stated in no uncertain terms that the overall project with respect to cost, schedule and scope is unsustainable. Based on this advice, I see no route by which trains can be running by 2033 as planned. He revealed costs will continue to increase if not taken in hand, further outstripping the budget set by the previous government. And he cannot be certain that all cost pressures have yet been identified. When it was originally announced, I don't know if you remember this, 330 miles of Y-shaped network connecting London, Birmingham, Manchester and Leeds, we were told it would cost £32.7 billion and that the first phase would open next year. £32.7 billion and the first phase would open next year, right? They are now telling us, or estimates are, that it is likely to cost £100 billion, and they don't know when the trains are going. I mean, that's quite normal in this country. We have no idea when the trains are actually going to run, but that's just on a day-to-day basis. That's when you turn up at the station and there's a little announcement on the notice board saying, sorry, that train's just been cancelled. Sometimes you get there, it gets cancelled after it should have left. So say I'm getting on the 7:32 to come to work. I get there at 7:30, the train's on the board, 7:33, 7:34, and then 7:32 gets cancelled at 7:35. So extraordinary. But I didn't expect it to happen on this kind of scale. So it's costing approximately 3 times as much. And I know about inflation, and I know that figures go up, and I know all of that malarkey. It's costing 3 times as much as was originally forecast. And as yet, they can't tell us when any trains will actually run. So I can't even remember who introduced it. Was it David Cameron? It was probably David Cameron. Was it David? Or was it even before that? Was it? I don't even know. But I do know this. Boris Johnson scaled it back. He cancelled the eastern leg to Leeds and York, presumably preferring non-existent bridges for the recipient of public money. 2 years later, Rishi Sunak went further and cancelled another bit. He cancelled it north of Birmingham, including the shortened leg to East Midlands Parkway. He also cast doubt on the short London leg between Euston and Old Oak Common, but they have re-established that. Heidi Alexander has confirmed that that is going to happen. Stopping it in Old Oak Common, I don't want to get into a boring transport phone-in, but that would have been really stupid. I'm just stopping myself from saying I don't want to sound naive, because I think that's how they get away with it, isn't it? Is that we sit here thinking, oh no, they must know what they're doing. They must know what they're doing, those grown-ups. They must know what they're doing, those professionals, those construction contract types, those people who do the things that we don't, the big people, the grown-ups who do the grown-up stuff. They must know what they're doing. So we are sitting there looking at this and thinking, yeah, maybe I'm naive, because that looks to me like a bloody great crime. The bridge across the Thames that never existed, 53 million quid. Why is no one in jail? Oh, I'm so naive. I think people should be in jail for that. The PPE contracts for PPE that wasn't fit for purpose. Why is nobody in jail? Oh, don't be so naive, James. You don't understand how business works. It's the same kind of people who tell you, oh, no, we've got to look after business. If we don't look after... Oh, no, there's some billionaires over there. They're really unhappy about a new government policy. We've got to get rid of the policy. We've got to keep them happy, because without them, oh, dear, there wouldn't be any chauffeurs. Imagine how hard our economy would be hit if all the chauffeurs were suddenly... I've got nothing against chauffeurs, by the way. My father-in-law was a chauffeur. It's a fine and noble profession. But I don't don't think it's a massive contributor to the UK economy. Why is no one in jail for the Rwanda thing? How can you be in government? How can prime ministers spend 700 million quid of your money, my money, our money on something that doesn't exist? Where else in the world, where else in your life would you be comfortable with somebody taking taking money out of your pocket and giving you back nothing? Would you like to buy a large pile of nothing? Yes, please. Where do I sign? You wouldn't do that anywhere else, but when your government does it, that's fine. When Boris Johnson does it, that's fine. 700 million quid. Who started Rwanda? Can you even remember? That was probably Boris bloody Johnson as well, wasn't it? 753 million quid and counting Boris Johnson is in for, and he's given us absolutely nothing in return. But HS2. I'm not naive. I'm just ignorant. There's a difference. Naivety involves not fully appreciating that you don't understand issues. I am ignorant. I do not know where this money goes. And you are going to tell me. 0345 6060 973. This is not a phone-in about whether or not HS2 is a good idea. I don't want... This is a little bit like how we started the show when I explained to you about being allergic to boring, predictable callers that we've all heard 700 times before. So do not ring me to tell me we're spending £100 billion to make it 20 minutes quicker to get to Birmingham. That is not the conversation that we're having. Apologies, there'll be plenty of phone-ins you can contribute to. Just ring in and saying, we're spending £100 billion so you can get to Birmingham 20 minutes faster. This is a conversation about where the money has gone. It's not about whether the original plan, the current plan, or the next plan is, was, or will be a good idea. It's about public sector expenditure. It's about what happens when politicians and or Whitehall get involved in things. You take extreme examples like Rwanda and the Garden Bridge, but then you take the mother of all examples, HS2, a project that is going to be coming in over a decade late, at 300% more than it should. So how does it happen? 0345 6060 973. Where does the money go? The call I'm not going to get, I don't imagine, but which would be the best, would be I've got it, James. John's in Epping Forest. John, what would you like to say? I've got it, James. I've got it. I'm the kind of guy who signs contracts and then doesn't build anything. I made 125 million out of the Rwanda thing. I can't tell you how much I made out of PPE because I'm afraid that case is still live. And I made 10 million quid out of the Boris Johnson's bridge. I was the one who provided the non-existent bollards. I provided the non-existent bollards for the non-existent bridge, and that was worth 20 million. That was worth 10 million quid. No one's going to call me and say, ha, 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 I am on the right end of this sweet, sweet gravy train. But second-hand, someone might know. Where does it go? Where does the money go? Why does the public sector apparently do this kind of thing so badly? 0345 6060 973. Tony writes, you seem to have started Mystery Hour very early this week. I've certainly broken one of my records for lengthy monologues, so I better shut up quickly and remind you, Mystery Hour, the real one, will be here at 12. The question, where does it go? Where does it go? How does it end up costing so much more than they told us it would and taking so much longer? Answer me that, and I'll give you the money myself.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I do like a viaduct. I mean, how much Victorian stuff do you look at and think there's no way we'd get that done today? What about cathedrals? I know they're not Victorian. There's something like Ely. Go and look at an old cathedral. I mean, there's no chance could you get that done today. No chance. It'd take 500 years and cost £1 gazillion. Actually, if Boris Johnson was involved, 2 gazillion. 2 gazillion. So, where does it go? What, who, why, where, when? What happened? What resulted? Whither, wherefore, whence? Even the occasional why. Simon's in Dorking. Simon, enlighten me.
Oh, good morning, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
The money goes to typically contractors who have been chosen as the cheapest price, having
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I should say I've worked in the civil engineering industry all my life. I've worked on HS1, I worked on the Channel Tunnel rail link, on the Channel Tunnel, on the Jubilee Line extension, all large multi-billion-pound projects, and they all suffer from the same problem.
Yes.
Originally, the client will say, we want this built, go out to the market, get several quotes, pick the cheapest, and from there on, you end up with the extra costs, because no contractor in this world that I've worked for is capable of working out the precise cost of a job.
Yeah, but you wouldn't get away with that in the private sector on this kind of scale.
Well, it happens. I mean, a lot of the
I know, but that's why I added on this kind of scale.
It is big. I grant you that.
But the bigness of the failure wouldn't happen in the private sector. You wouldn't. I mean, for a start, your heads would roll. People would be fired or jailed, or there's no earthly way you could end up 300% over budget on something if you were being held to account by shareholders.
I think you'll find that is fairly typical in the private sector as well. There have been many studies done across the world. I lived in Australia for 15 years doing the same kind of work, and they have the same problem. How is it that we cannot build large projects on time and to cost? It's a problem everywhere, and it originates in the nature of the contract that is let. There are other ways of doing construction, including, let's have a guess at how much it costs between the promoter and the contractor.
Yeah.
We'll set a target, and then we'll see how we go. The contractors often say, when would you like to know the real price? At the beginning, at the job, or at the end?
Well, and everyone just laughs. Ho, yes. Ho, ho, chuckles, doubles, trebles all round.
That's right. Until we have a cooperative approach to building things that say, look, this is going to cost what it's going to cost. We don't know precisely how much, but we will do our best to keep costs down by working together.
So, and the politicians are too stupid to realise, or they're just...
No, it goes in cycles.
Go on.
It goes in cycles. I think that there were some enlightened contractual approaches back in the early 90s, when the Jubilee Line extension, for example, was under construction.
Yeah.
Then people come and go, and they go, oh, no, we can't. I mean, some clients take the view, how on earth can we allow contractors to make profits? That's not on. We must squeeze them until the pips squeak, you know.
Yeah, that's silly.
And then we'll have the cheapest. We'll make them quote a price, and we'll hold them to it. And that is disastrous. It always is.
And everybody knows, except the people who don't know, that the price that's being quoted is pie in the sky. You might have just plucked it. So if a politician announces tomorrow that they are building a big castle in the sky, and it will cost £100 million and it'll be ready in 2029, you would know that was absolute hot. You would know immediately that is just they might as well have said £500 million in 2034. It would be equally plausible.
If they picked the cheapest, yes. That's typically what happens, and there are alternatives to doing this, and you just have to face up to the fact that, see, nobody wants to know, often they don't want to know the real price of something because it would never get built. The Channel Tunnel was a classic. It started off at $5 billion and ended up at $10 billion. We all knew it wasn't going to cost $5 billion.
But they wouldn't have got it over the line if they'd said that it was going to cost $10 billion.
Exactly.
Well, I can live with that. I can live with that sort of finagling, that sort of sleight of hand. What about... Well, hang on. I need to ask you a very important question, Simon.
Go ahead.
How much of it have you got?
Well, I earned my salary, and a lot of it is public money. I don't think... There is some fraud, and there is some... shenanigans going on in the construction industry to do with, labour hire and plant hire and that sort of thing. But I don't think it's endemic, and I don't think it. I don't think it is either.
Actually, I was just wondering. And on the, I said I wasn't going to ask this question, but when I talk about the other two examples I've provided, when nothing got built, the Garden Bridge and Rwanda, which isn't actually your field of expertise, obviously, but tens or hundreds of millions of pounds in return for a large box of nothing. Is that part of the same pattern that you've described to me?
A little bit. I mean, there is a lot of money spent on consultants. If you're a government and you don't have the expertise, you go to consultants and ask them questions, and they're very expensive, but they don't tend to be more than in the tens of millions. We're not talking about hundreds of millions for consultancy expertise.
Sure.
Designs typically cost approximately 4 or 5% of the capital cost of the project. So it's actually quite good value for money to get a good consultant to be advised.
Yeah,
with.
no, of course it is. So, I mean, you're making it make sense. I don't know that I want it to make sense. I'm with Ian on this, who describes himself today as really bitter, Ian. He was quite bitter late last week over, I can't remember exactly what he was bitter about, but he was definitely bitter. He's been getting bitterer by the day. He says, I'm so blooming glad you're talking about this. How on earth, if you bid for a contract and build something and get awarded that contract, then why are overspends and over-budget contracts not the responsibility of the person who said it would cost that much in the first place? Over budget? Sorry, bud, that's on you. You said it had cost 30 billion. If it now costs 100 billion, then it's on you, not me. If I quote for some work, it's a bit different in my line, but, you know, if your builder is building you a new extension and they quote for some work and come back and tell you, or it ends up costing, you'd get on Watchdog. You'd get Matt Allwright. That's who we need on. Where's Matt Allwright when you need him? If this was on a domestic scale, if someone was putting in a new bathroom for you and they said it'll be £5,000 and we'll be done by Tuesday, and it ended up costing £50,000 and 18 months later, it was they'd be sanctions, but that's the bit I don't get. Simon's provided a perfect start to this conversation, but that's the bit I don't get. If this was happening on a domestic level in your bathroom or your back garden, Matt Allwright would be all over it. And yet here we are talking about 100 billion quid on a national level, and everybody's like, yeah, that's the way it goes, James. That's just business as usual. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:34. This is one of those moments on the radio where you will always remember where you were when it happened. I found a headline that actually fulfills all three of our shared criteria. It is unhinged. It is a perfect participant in our missing word round. And it is an invitation to a missed information as well. And we don't actually have a jingle for the missing word round. And we don't remember often enough to do the unhinged headline and the missed information. But this is the first time ever that all three of those radio planets have aligned. We now have a story that is an unhinged headline, a perfect contender for the missing words round, and an applicant for missed information. So, fanfare, please.
Unhinged headline.
But also
missed information.
Thank you, Emily. And a blank, a missing word round. So I'll read it to you with the blank first, okay? Because, of course, I can't reveal how unhinged it is until I've revealed what the missing words are. And then I'll do the missed information. Surrender! In big, great, whopping capital letters. Surrender! Fury! As Sir Keir Starmer's Brexit deal may change blank. Surrender fury as Sir Keir Starmer's Brexit deal may change blank. So when Keir Starmer began to unpick the madness of what Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings and David Frosty Frost had put together in the context of an oven-ready deal that they were disowning before the ink had even dried on it, of course the people who flogged it to you lack the basic honesty and decency to admit that finally someone was clearing up the mess they'd made. But their search for things to get angry about has been quite long and fruitless. Finally, they found something that they can get angry about. Surrender fury as Sir Keir Starmer's Brexit deal may change blank. And I'll tell you what that is shortly. And then, of course, I'll be able to tell you, well, you'll be able to see for yourself just how unhinged the headline is, and I'll provide you with the little bit of missed information that you need. 11:37 is the time. John's in Peterborough. Where's all the money gone, John?
I would say, health and safety is a lot of it.
Oh, stop your jibber jabber.
No. Well, the cost of health and safety, we all agree we need health and safety. I mean, everything has to be a safe site, but it's got to a level of ridiculousness. No,
it hasn't.
And not just on HS2, but
nonsense. How come in Spain? In Spain, they've managed to build 2,500 miles of high-speed rail, and we can't even build 68, and they will be subject to exactly the same health and safety regulations that we were.
It's not whether you can build it, it's the cost of it. So, for example, if I want to put my staff onto a big project, not necessarily HS2, but a big project, most of them want you to do a full one-day induction. Then you have to do a site-specific induction.
But these laws will be the same in Spain.
Yeah, whether they are or they're not, at the end of the day...
Well, no, you can't say that this is the reason why it's happening when it's not happening in another country that is subject to the same laws.
You were saying a minute ago, it's going to cost up to 100 billion. I reckon at least a third of that is ridiculous red tape and health and safety.
Well, I don't know how many times I need to say this to you, but Spain will be subject to exactly the same laws, and they have built 2,500 miles of high-speed rail for a fraction of the cost and on budget.
And can you tell me what qualifications they do that? And what health and safety...
No, I can tell you what the law is. I can tell you what the regulations are, and I can tell you who was in charge of governing over them. And the answer is the European Union until relatively recently. So we are subject to precisely the same scenarios. I find that if people think the answer to a question is health and safety in a negative way, then they are almost always talking gibberish. It's possible that you're the exception to that rule, but health and safety is the reason why HS2 is coming. Why is it coming in so late then?
Well, the health and safety side. So I'll give you
why is it coming in so late?
Example.
I'm not interested in your health and safety related anecdotes. Okay. Why is it coming in 20 years late?
So if I want to go and do a job which takes me 20 minutes, it's going to take me a week to get on site.
11:39 is the time. Gary is in Calais. Gary, what would you like to say?
Hello, mate. Well, first off, I used to be an health and safety manager in the previous call, talking garbage, but never mind. And I was actually in construction for 40 years on some of the largest sites in the world.
Thank you for confirming my instincts.
Right, and you never hear the man who had his arm ripped off by a machine saying there was too much health and safety on the site.
That's a very good point.
That's the first thing, okay? Now, the money, I've got to be very careful what I say now, because there's a personal involvement to this.
Okay.
You want to know where some of the money goes? I'm actually looking at it about a mile up the road from where I'm in France, in my friend's 10-bedroom chateau as a barrister solicitor on the legal side, okay?
Yes.
Now, I'm not going to use his first name.
No, please stop. London. No, yes, carry on.
Okay, and I was in construction for 40-odd years, as I said. And he comes to me on occasion, how you doing, mate? I want to retire, but I cannot give up. Because literally they've got his name where one of the directors of HS2 is. It says, phone X.
Yes.
I said, what one are you working on at the moment, mate? He said, there's a multi-million-pound part of the contract to go across an area in the Midlands. All of the quotes have gone in. Everyone's done their thing. This is multi-million. They've now just discovered underneath a whole system labyrinth of Victorian tunnels.
Yeah.
Right, that's now put this part of the project absolutely ballistic, price-wise. The people at the top of HS2 are turning around and saying to the contractor, this is now going to cost you 10 times what you put in for.
Got it, yeah.
They're turning around and saying, we never had the information. They're saying all that information was readily available. It was stuck in an archive somewhere in Leicestershire.
Yes.
They're saying that should have been put on the table. First off, we would have quoted differently. My friend, can't use his name, is saying this is atomic. And he said that's just one of many that we're dealing with throughout the whole of this project. It's down to poor management.
And the lawyers are the ones that the lawyers are laughing all the way to the bank.
Actually, to his 10-bedroom chateau half a mile up my valley.
Half a mile up my valley. That sounds like a memoir. Yeah, and that's kind of inevitable. But the second bit of the story is inevitable. These lawyers have incredibly high rates, and that's why he can't retire. You keep reminding me of a conversation I had earlier this week with Michael Lewis, which I must refer back to. But the first bit could have been avoidable, and that's where my analogy with a bathroom extension becomes pertinent. Yes. In that if my builder turned up, quoted me for a job, and then came back and said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, we didn't realise that you're on a floodplain, or there's a medieval chapel underneath your spare bedroom," then who's responsible for the extra cost, him or me?
That's the point. It would be you either A, should you have been aware at the time, or B, did you supply me all the information? And literally, that's what these court cases go on for years about.
Yeah, and that will be part of it, much more than the health and safety contribution. It's not going to be all of it, but it's going to be part of it. And it's poor management. It's going back to Simon in Dorking, announcing things, knowing that this isn't going to be the answer, and then coming back and saying, actually, it's going to cost more. And what we'd missed, that for every element that fits that description, there'll be lots of lawyers rubbing their hands with glee. Another Gary's been in touch to say, I like Gary in Calais. Gary? That's a little bromance, a Gary bromance going on there. That's from Gary Burton. That's lovely stuff, mate. Stay safe. Regards to your mate halfway up the valley with his 10-bedroom chateau. To be fair, you get quite a lot of chateau for your buck in France. You'd be surprised at some of the properties you can pick up. Michael Lewis. I said I'd mention Michael Lewis. You know who Michael Lewis is. He is the guy that wrote Moneyball, and he wrote Liar's Poker. That's probably the most relevant one to the what I'm about. He's brilliant. He's one of the finest journalists of his generation. You'll be familiar with The Blind Side, the one about the American football college boy. You'll be familiar with Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game, Coach. Oh, and The Big Short, probably the biggest one that you'll be aware of. His first book was called Liar's Poker. Went to work in the city after graduating from Princeton, I think it was. And he is not the only one. Got a touch of the Gary Stevensons to him when it comes to blowing the lid off a world that the rest of us don't know much about, but it comes from a very different background from Gary. It comes from a very privileged background in New Orleans. It's a brilliant episode of Full Disclosure that's on the way. But he said to me just earlier this week that he couldn't believe the money he was being paid for advice when he was working for a big brokerage firm. He said I knew nothing. It's just the way the system works. Lawyers are different, but quite a lot of the money people, the money's just invented. And he's one of the ones that's prepared to admit it. It's like the opposite of imposter syndrome. So there's no way I'm worth this money. But I'm happy to take it while they're happy to give it to me. So that's going to be part of the problem as well. I've got another little flashback to earlier this month for you. When we were talking about the winter fuel allowance and the U-turn, brilliant contributor pointed out that we still in this country have a sense that everybody old fought in the Second World War. I know that sounds a bit silly, and it's certainly not disrespectful because it hadn't occurred to me before. But I'm 53. I'm going to qualify for the pension in a decade and a half. And yet I still, at the age of 53, somewhere in my head, if I see someone with white hair, somewhere subconsciously I'm thinking of this is why you can, fetishize isn't quite the right word, but it was the only one I could come up with, the elderly. And it's good. They don't get enough support in many ways, and they get forgotten and ignored in many ways. But when it comes to something like winter fuel allowance, the reason why it became so toxic was because of this widespread sense that we were somehow picking the pockets of war veterans. What I hadn't realised at the time was that the LBC archives contained an example of exactly what we were talking about. You might want to double-check the words I'm about to say out loud, but Gemma Collins appeared on Tom Swarbrick's show once. I'll say that again. Gemma Collins appeared on Tom Swarbrick's show once to discuss the winter fuel allowance. Is that right? Was it, or was she booked for something else and Tom just thought, I'll ask her about the winter fuel allowance? It's topical. Gemma Collins is a sort of reality television star, I think, The Only Way is Essex, or one of those type shows. And so, just in case you thought I was exaggerating, when I talked about the way in which people automatically associate, and completely wrongly, old age pensioners with the Second World War, I shall play you this clip from the LBC archives of Gemma Collins talking to Tom Swarbrick about the winter fuel allowance. And then I'll tell you how many there are, because they've actually done, by complete coincidence, someone has actually counted the number of people still with us who are World War II veterans, and I just found the number really interesting. It's probably a little bit, well, I don't know whether it's going to be higher or lower than what you expect, but it certainly doesn't describe pretty much everybody who had their winter fuel allowance taken away. Anyway, here is one of the great political sages of our time.
One thing that the Labour government have done recently is to say that there won't be winter fuel payments universally paid out to pensioners. It will only be those on pension credit, and there are going to be a lot of pensioners who may well suffer as a result. Do you think that's
disgusting? That's disgusting, yeah.
You think it should be
I am sick to death, and I am so saddened by how we are treated, our pensioners are treated in this country. You know, they've all been to war for us, their husbands, wives, you know, they fought for this country, and look how they get treated in return. It is disgusting.
There it is. I honestly didn't know that existed. Perfect real-time proof of the idea that some people think, a lot of us think, there's a widespread perception that every old age pensioner in the country was there on D-Day. I'll give you the actual number after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:51 is the time. So a rough estimate of about 9 million people affected by the winter fuel cuts, and then, of course, affected by the U-turn on the... So out of 9 million, how many do you think fought in the Second World War? Because that lovely clip from that lovely lady a moment ago highlighted quite a widespread misconception. The answer is 8,000. They finally got around to counting it, and you shouldn't be surprised because, if David's dad celebrated his 90th birthday this weekend, he was 10 when the war ended. So you're essentially talking about people who are either over or very close to the age of 100. Chris writes, I'm 66 in a few weeks. I just snuck into retirement age by a month or two before it goes up to 67, and I can only just about remember the Beatles. I was 7 when England won the World Cup. So this bizarre, I think it was a large part of the problem for the winter fuel cut. There's this sense that we were somehow picking the pockets of people who went to war for us. And what I would do, find those 8,000 and give them all a bit of money that we've clawed back from the people responsible for HS2 overspends, garden bridges and Rwanda schemes. Give them all £1 million each, and you'd still have change. It's 11:52. Maybe not 1 million. Maybe 100,000. So where does all the money go? How does it happen? Ian's in Lancaster. Ian, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello.
Yeah, you've picked a subject that is very dear to my heart, which frustrates me on a daily basis as I work in construction.
Yes.
And I've worked in construction for 35 years. There is a real simple answer to this, and I don't want to sound smug, but it is this simple. The UK construction industry used to be run by engineers, but it's now run by commercial managers, and it's changed dramatically in the last 20 years. I really noticed it because I moved over to Australia for about 10 years. And when I came back to the UK, the industry had changed so dramatically. And this is how it works. When they're costing up a project like HS2, you would be shocked as to how little input there is from actual engineers, structural engineers, project managers, the people who will actually engineer this project through to completion. And the commercial managers that head up these projects are looking at budgets based on approximate cost per square metre, approximate tonnages per cubic metre, things that are okay on a shopping list. But when you're actually looking at the challenges of the construction projects in reality, the engineering is completely overlooked. And then when it comes to physically starting and progressing the project, the realities of the construction limitations and the engineering requirement become real. And it's not just money anymore, it's actually a real cost. And it's just completely overlooked. And if you look at a project like the Channel Tunnel, that was a very, very successful project, which I just don't think we could ever deliver now because, as I say,
got bad in that time scale. I think Simon worked on the Channel Tunnel, so he'd probably agree with you. And so that has happened in the space of 30 years, then 30 or 40 years.
Completely, yeah.
Space of your career. Is it your fault?
Yeah, probably. It's the only job I've ever done. I've started in this industry at 17, and the changes that I've seen down the years are just shocking. Like, to put it in perspective, I'm looking at a job at the moment where we've got to construct a basement.
Yeah.
But the client doesn't yet know how deep he wants to dig this basement, and he wants us to lock in a firm price.
Before he's told you how deep it's going to be.
Exactly. And the option that he's looking at, we're telling him, look, if you build that, your basement wall's going to move so much it's going to crack.
Right.
And he's not interested in that. He just wants to spend X pounds and doesn't want to spend Y pounds for the engineered
if I was a commercial
solution.
manager, if I was on commission to sign him up for the deal, I wouldn't be worrying about that stuff. I'd just be getting his signature and his check. Is that right?
Well, no, because in reality, then the job is going to blow out in cost. So the commercial manager is going to have an absolute nightmare trying to settle a final account on the job,
right.
and he'll have a wall that won't stand up. So
Yeah, but apart from that, you need the Bee Gees. How deep is your basement? That was the lyric. That was the lyric they rejected. So, and briefly, and a lot of people agreeing with you. This man is spot on. Software is exactly the same. Nobody ever asks the people who do the actual work. Totally agree with this caller. As someone in civil engineering who has to put costs forward for my section of a project, only to have it costed down by the project manager in order to get the commission. And this is quite extraordinary, actually. I bet you thought this was quite a dry subject when you rang in, but you've absolutely put the cat among the pigeons. Craig says this man is spot on. It's not just this industry. Aerospace and manufacturing are the same. I've seen it all my life. So why have they done it? You know, if they were to say, yeah, but the reason, however cynical your analysis is, I presume it involves money somewhere along the line, but why have they done this when it is so obviously going to cause the problems that we have been discussing all morning?
Exactly. It was like a flagship project for the UK, but that would have had a budget that was accepted by government, and they would have only signed up to that number, and the attitude would have been, we'll make it work for that number. But you just can't do that on a job like HS2. Like the practicalities of that job are just so huge, and you just can't mix and match. So
this was inevitable. This isn't even vaguely surprising. It would have been an absolute miracle if it hadn't ended up like this.
It's completely, and what makes it even worse is I do feel for the commercial guys, but the reality is that they don't have the engineering background to challenge these solutions that are put forward, and they're having to make decisions. But,
You're a good man.
Without having the engineering now to make those decisions.
So they're trying to make a cake without a recipe, as it were. And
that's exactly it.
That's very generous of you, actually. And I'd be more bitter than you, but I guess you're closer to the action. Thank you. I've actually got a much better understanding now than I did before. But that has really touched nerves galore. Chris in touch. So this man explaining the problems in UK manufacturing and industry as well, not just construction. Managers blagging their way through meetings right up until the rubber hits the road, which is when it all goes wrong. I love that. Time now for a combination of
Unhinged headline
and missed information.
Thank you, Emily. And the missing word round. I'm going to lose this. So Fury. Surrender, fury, as Sir Keir Starmer's Brexit deal may change, blank. Do you know what it is? What do you think they're furious about now? So it's going to be something huge, right? It's going to be something massive like small boats or, I don't know, the economy. Could it be the economy? It's going to change the economy. It's going to inflation. Surrender, fury, as Sir Keir Starmer's Brexit deal may change. Flavour of popular crisps. Flavour of popular crisps. What could this story? Sir Keir Starmer has been blasted for a smoky bacon surrender after his Brexit deal left Britain taking orders from Brussels on what goes in our crisps. Who has blasted Keir Starmer for this, do you think? I mean, apart from The Sun, who've decided that this constitutes journalism, who on earth is going to be cross about this? Who could anyone? I mean, anybody responsible for bringing you Brexit should be hiding in a very deep hole for the rest of their lives. So and I'll give you the missed information on it as well, because even without checking, I can tell you what's happening here. There will be rules you need to abide by if you want to sell your product into the European Union, and quite a lot of smoke-related ingredients have been found to be carcinogenic. So in the window of time since we left, I imagine that they've added to the list of substances you're not allowed to use, smoky flavours, some that were previously used. That will be the missed information in the story. But who on earth could genuinely be furious about a mooted possible change in smoky bacon crisp flavours? If you accept that Golden Wonder and Walkers and all the big... Golden Wonder's still a thing? But all the big players in the crisp world, if you're selling crisps into the European Union, you're already obeying these rules. So I am going to scroll down this story. But before I scroll down this story, I'm going to predict that they haven't found a single crisp manufacturer to complain. So Keir Starmer has been blasted for a smoky brand. The PM agreed to follow new EU rules, including a ban on smoke favouring, still allowed in the UK, prompting fears much-loved bacon crisps will never taste the same. Reform UK leader... who else? So Farage is cross about it. He told the Telegraph, leave our smoky bacon alone. Still looking for a company that's actually affected by this. Shadow Cabinet Minister Richard Holden said Labour's smoky bacon surrender is just the latest flavour of betrayal. Is it April the 1st? It's not April, it's June. So looking for just one article, because, the Sun have got phones. They can make some calls to crisp have we got a single crisp manufacturer who is complaining about? No. So that is what passes both for journalism in this country at the moment and as a cause for people like Nigel Farage and Richard Holden. No crisps have been hurt.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 12 is the time. I forgot about Mystery Hour, only for a minute. I told you about it at about 12:30. We didn't do it last week because the news was so grim. We felt it would be inappropriate, which means that I imagine that there's going to be quite a backlog. Anyway, the number you need is 0345 6060973. If you're new to this feature, you're in for both a treat and a surprise. It's generally very funny, although it's been quite a funny show already today, for once. But also very informative. However, it's completely different from the other 14 hours of the week that we spend together. So be prepared for that. People ring in with questions, and then other people ring in with the answers. If you make my favourite contribution of the week, you even win a prize. It's the only time we do prizes. You win a Mystery Hour board game. Genuinely, it's there. The full terms and conditions for that competition can be found at lbc.co.uk. And you can go to mysteryhour.co.uk to find out more about the actual board game itself. So I was just a bit distracted there by the number of people reminding me in my inbox, having heard Priti Patel in the news bulletin. I thought that was a brilliant news bulletin from Thomas, because it's hard to imagine two contributors so far apart in intellect and insight than Priti Patel and then the former member of Joe Biden's administration, who was quoted on essentially the same story. An extraordinary number of people reminding me that Priti Patel had to resign, or was indeed fired from the UK government for holding secret meetings with the Israeli government. So what a massive surprise that she's fully in favour of the Israeli government doing whatever the Israeli government wants to do, or indeed America joining in to do with the Israeli government whatever the Israeli government wants to do. And I missed the guy. Obviously, you can't talk about crisps in this country without mentioning Gary Lineker. So my apologies to Gary and indeed to everybody for having a conversation, an unhinged headline, a missed information, a missing word round that was all about crisps and completely failed to mention the patron saint of crisps in this country, Sir Gary of Lineker, or St. Gary of Lineker. It is 7 minutes after 12. Sarah, I need to apologise to Sarah and to Colin and Loki, her dogs. She writes, most of the time when you have an unhinged headline, etc., I usually just provide a tusk noise and shake my head. This time, though, I couldn't help but cry out, oh, for flip's sake, much to the concern of my dogs, Colin and Loki. Well, everything is all right now. Let's calm down. Mystery Hour is upon us. Shall we just crack straight on? If you don't know what it's all about, you'll work it out. Phones are ringing now. Everyone else forgot as well, except Chris in Poole, who was waiting there, finger poised, hovering above the dial to jump in at the first opportunity, and that's why he got to the front of the queue this week. Chris, question or answer?
The question, please, James.
Carry on.
First of all, it's a pleasure to speak to you, mate. Absolutely love the show.
Thank you.
So, if you get your fingers cut off...
all of them?
Well, one or all of them, I suppose it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
If you get it on ice quick enough and get to the hospital, they can reattach them. I was just wondering though, do you still have feelings when it's all healed? Do you still get feeling in the end of them again? Because I don't know whether if they reattach them, does the synaptic nerve link or whatever it is, does that get reestablished or healed or?
What have you got planned?
Absolutely nothing.
You're not trimming the hedge this weekend or anything like that?
No, I'm actually trimming at the moment. I'm a tree surgeon. So.
Are you really? Well, oh God! Well, no wonder you're thinking about it. So that wasn't actually. That was trying to be light-hearted, but that's why it's in your mind, because you're more likely to lose a finger than perhaps, say, a radio presenter is.
Well, quite possibly, yeah.
Well, let's hope not, mate. You do be careful and don't get distracted. But So I mean, a surgeon would probably know, but would it depend on how much of the finger you lost, or are you specifying more or less a whole finger?
Yeah, I guess also it probably depends on how, clean the cut is and how easy it is to reattach.
Yeah, but I mean, we just want to know, is it, in the event of you losing a finger and it being reattached, will you still have all the feeling that you had before?
Yeah, that's the question.
I like that question. But, I mean, but let's hope we never find out.
No, hopefully I don't have to ring you back in a year or two and let you know the answer.
Well, and provide the answer. Oh, that would be a great hook and tease, wouldn't it? That would be
a mystery hour full circle.
Let's find out for you, okay? It is 12:09 and you are listening to... Actually, while I have you...
Go on.
I've got a damson tree.
Right.
And it was... the garden when we bought the house was a jungle. I mean, it was literally 8 foot high. The grass, it was amazing. I could have done a crop circle. And because of that, it was so overgrown around the damson tree. It grew really, really long and thin and just fruited right at the top. And so we were going to knock it down, but we've tried to save it. And it's working really well. Is there anything else I can do to get new branches lower down on the trunk, or do I just have to carry on gently encouraging it like I've been doing for a couple of years?
Yeah, I think gently encouraging it. I guess if it's grown up high, and all the growth and the fruit is at the top, it could be blocking the sunlight at the bottom. So maybe thin it out.
It's not that big. I've thinned it out already. I just wondered because what I've got a lot of trunk before I get to I should rephrase that. There's a lot before I get to the branches, and so do you see what I mean? So the branches are going well now, but there's no way I can sort of like what I would do is chop about 2 foot off the trunk from the bottom, but obviously I can't do that because I'd kill the trees. But there's nothing you can do to encourage branch growth from the trunk.
I can't think off the top of my head.
No, nor can I. No, I'm just checking. I mean, you're the expert. 10 minutes after 12 is the time. I've got a lot. Frank's in Carlisle. Frank, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Frank.
If you've got carpets in your house and you put a rug down, then the rug tends to move, doesn't it? You have to pull it back into position.
Do you know, whenever I visit my mum, that's my first job when I get into the sitting room, is to pull the rug back into position.
This is it, right? The question is, why do they always go the same way? So I've got a rug in the hallway, and it always migrates towards the door. It doesn't go the other way. And I walk both ways down that rug. I don't run out the front door and come back round again.
No, but you must, over the course of a day or a week or a month, you must make one journey a lot more than you make the other.
It's in the hallway. If I go down the hallway, I've got to come back.
Yeah,
Unless I go out the front door, come round the back of the house and go in again. So, there's no other way from one side of the house to the other.
I'm just constructing a diagram of your house.
Go for it. Yeah. So basically, you've got a front door, and then you've got a hallway into the into the main house.
Yeah. What have you got? What's the first door on the right?
There's just stairs on the right, up the stairs.
So up the stairs, and the first door on the left.
There's nothing. There's just a door.
So it just goes into the straight into the main bit of the house.
Downstairs is open plan. There's no other doors into the downstairs from the front door other than past this rug.
And so you wouldn't ever step on the rug unless you were going out. You wouldn't go down that hallway to access it. What about the staircase? Do you go down the rug to get to the staircase?
Nope.
So why would it always move in the same direction?
Yep.
Gravity.
Well, it's flat. Gravity works downwards. I mean, come on.
Osmosis.
Migratory habits.
Migratory rugs. Why do rugs always migrate in the same direction, even if you are not walking in that direction more often than you're walking in the opposite direction?
That's the question.
I like it. Find out for you, I hope, Frank, but I can't make any promises. This being Mystery Hour, 0345 6060973 is the number that you need if you can answer Frank or Chris's question. And now we'll take another one from Pete, who's in Fetcham. Pete, question or answer?
Hello, mate. It's question.
Carry on.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for entertaining my wife for the past God knows how long.
Steady on, Pete. Steady on, Pete. People might get the wrong idea.
That's a fair point.
Go on. Well, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure entirely.
She has your books and she has the game as well.
Oh, how lovely.
Unfortunately, she died last November, so she won't be listening anymore.
Oh, Pete, I'm so sorry for your loss. I really am. I really am, and I'm so really quite moved to know that I managed to bring a bit of happiness into her life before you lost her. Take my condolences. My condolences.
That's very nice of you. Anyway, I have a question for you. How do birds, like, for instance, seagulls, know that they're swooping down on chips, for instance, and not just a bunch of plastic in a container?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've got eyes.
Yeah, but
you'd only swoop down on plastic.
Does it?
You'd only swoop. You'd only swoop down on plastic once, wouldn't you?
Are you breaking those teeth in for the dog?
You'd soon realise. So I imagine they've swooped on other stuff once and realised that wasn't food.
Okay. So if it changes shape, changes colour, looks like a chip.
Walks like a chip.
Yeah.
Then they would go for that again and again. I don't know. How does a seagull know it's a chip or a pasty? They like pasties, don't they?
Yes,
a pasty could easily be a book. I mean, there's that. It'd probably be easier to mistake a pasty, a non-pasty for a pasty than it would a non-chip for a chip. There's not a lot of stuff that looks like chips that isn't chips, but a pasty, a sort of oblong, a rectangular shaped beige thing, they'd be swooping down all the time. How does a seagull know it's food?
Absolutely.
I love it, Pete.
Thank you very much indeed, James.
Thank you, mate, as well. And do take care of yourself. It's 12:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Oh, we never ring people back on this programme if they've texted in. I don't want you to read anything into that. I can't get through on the phone, but I can answer the question about fingers from personal experience. Right, Steve. That's hard to resist.
James O'Brien on LBC.
You're right, a lot of you saying you don't need to phone Steve. Someone will ring in, someone will get through. That's how Mystery Hour works. I can't imagine ever phoning up a texter from a radio studio because you're short of calls. That never happens, I'm certain of it. It's 12:17, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you get your finger chopped off, do you know what John said? He said, listening to Chris asking about what happens if you get your finger chopped, and he was a tree surgeon, so it's probably an occupational hazard. I'd have thought more for tree surgeons than almost anybody else. He said, if that guy does lose a finger, James, you'd better give him a Ray Liotta. and also, in Pedant's Corner, I don't know why I described Ginster's slice then when I was talking about pasties. I said an oblong, a rectangular shape, and quite a few of you quite cross with me, especially people from Devon and Cornwall, pointing out that a pasty is actually it's a semicircle, isn't it? So I don't know why in my mind's eye I had a steak bake or a Ginster's cheese and onion slice, not an actual pasty with the nice crust, with the fluted crust and the whole shebang. But the question remains, how does a seagull know it's food before it swoops down to nick it? And why does Frank's carpet always migrate in the same direction, even though he's adamant he walks up and down it equally? Gabby's in Beaconsfield. Gabby, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on, Gabby.
And this is about your fingers being chopped off.
Oh, yes.
So there are kind of two answers, really, because you need a blood supply, a proper blood supply, and often with circular saw injuries, the vessels can get pulled. They call it a ribbon effect.
Right.
Like when you pull a ribbon on a parcel and it all coils up.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they try to repair...
God, I don't know why you did that. I was all right when you said the ribbon effect, and then you painted a picture. And everything went a little bit green for me at that point. On a finger. Stop it. Don't do that again. All right, carry on.
Sorry.
So that means you can't reconnect them, and then for the blood supply wouldn't get to the end of the finger, so you wouldn't have your feeling.
Oh, well, yeah, there's a part two. So if they do reconnect,
yes,
they will try to re-establish the blood flow using medical leeches.
Oh, really? Yes, of course, yes. Okay.
Yeah. But I had a patient who almost lost 4 fingers. He did lose his little finger. And his other 3 were hanging on by a thread. And he worked so hard with his rehabilitation. He did have nerve involvement on his index finger.
Right.
So they will repair the neurovascular bundle on the side. You've got either a radial one or an ulnar one. His radial one had been damaged,
and he will have. So it is possible, but not guaranteed, that you would retain full feeling in your finger.
They would reconnect everything, and then gradually the nerve will grow back within the tube, just very, very slowly. And you would have to do, in terms of rehab, lots of desensitization and stimulation to try to get the feeling back.
That's fantastic. Qualifications?
I'm a hand therapist.
Literally, a hand therapist.
I'm an occupational therapist who specialised in hand therapy.
How many of them
I'd love
are
to give
you?
a shout out to my team if I could.
Yeah, how big is... I mean, how many... specifically hand therapists, how many will there be in the country at the moment, roughly?
Oh, God, loads of them.
Oh, all right.
There's loads
Yeah,
of
carry on.
teams.
Give a shout-out to your team, by all means.
Okay, hi to all the team at Wexham Park Hospital, hand therapy.
There's a big hand there for the hand therapist at Wexham, for the whole team, the whole hand therapy team at Wexham Park Hospital. Although Bob in Norfolk raises an interesting point, Gabby.
Yeah.
He says, James, the whole premise of the finger question is flawed. If you cut all your fingers off, you wouldn't be able to take them to the hospital to have them sewn back on because you wouldn't have been able to pick them up.
Oh, but if they're just hanging on by skin and soft
I
tissue.
said not to do any more of that, Gabby. I literally said to you, stop it, and you just couldn't help yourself, could you? Thank you. Great. Have another round of applause.
Thank you.
Just to distract me. 21 minutes after 12 is the time. Steve's been back in touch. He's threatening to send pictures now, but Gabby's answered the question, mate. Oh, I'm not... Oh, wow. I have my hand attached to my stomach. Here's so texts taken out of context, or people who've just turned on their radio. Steve has been in touch to say, I had my hand attached to my stomach to grow the skin back, and he is threatening or offering to send pictures. I don't know, Steve. If there's a phone line free now, you can grab Gabby's if you're quick, but only if you've got something to add to what she told us. Nick's in Dudley. Nick, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on, Nick.
And I don't mean to diminish the quality of the profession and the difficulty of it, but if you're an airline pilot, how it's a good start. How difficult is it to fly between? You sit down in the cockpit.
Yeah.
How much difference is there between flying to Rome, Barcelona, the Maldives? What's different? Because presumably the navigation's on autopilot, isn't it?
Pretty much.
I appreciate. Yeah, takeoff. Obviously, you've got to do what you've got to do with the weather. Is there any real difference between flying to one airport or the other?
I mean, landing is going to be trickier. It's going to be different at each airport. But the bit in... So are you asking about that, or are you asking about the bit in between taking off and landing?
The bit in between. I know they've landed. I know Innsbruck in Austria I've flown to, and that's quite a steep descent, I believe. So I think you have to have a certain qualified or experienced pilot to do that.
But the actual flight, the mid-flight bit... I mean, in a way, you're asking whether the pilot does anything, aren't you?
I caveated it with, not to diminish the difficulty.
No, I know. And also, you wouldn't not want one there. Just take our chances on landing and take off because, it's a 14-hour flight and they're only busy for 20 minutes. So what does flying involve when you're not doing takeoff and landing? And does it change according to the route?
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be the weather rather than the route, isn't it? I'd have thought. It's going to be meteorological.
I don't know.
No, fine, altitudes.
For instance, if you fly over the Alps, for instance, do you have to do something different if you're flying over the Med? I don't know.
No, nor do I. That's why it's on Mystery Hour.
Exactly.
Well played.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, Nick. What do pilots do? 03456060973. That's not quite what he asked, and he was at great pains, not in any way to diminish, because it's a long period of training, so obviously the answer is going to involve something that neither Nick nor I are currently aware of. But what are the differences? Differences. I'd have thought that the differences in planes and the differences in weather were probably more relevant to his question, or to the answer to his question, than differences in route, but what do I know? 12:24 is the time. Mark's in Hazelmere. Mark, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on, Mark.
It's about the rug moving.
Oh, yes.
I only came in halfway on it, but so basically it will always move in the direction of the nap of the carpet that's underneath it.
Oh.
So every fabric, be it carpet or cloth of some sort, will have a directional nap that always lays in one direction.
Yes.
And the motion of you walking on it will push it in that direction. It never goes against the nap, so it'll always travel in one direction.
Because if you're walking against the nap, it's going to actually resist the rug.
It resists, but it pushes it back underneath you, yeah. So it's almost like walking in the wrong direction. So it'll push back against you. It'll always go with the nap. This often happens on Mystery Hour, Mark. I thought the question was quite interesting, but not that is such a fantastic answer. Well, there you are. That's so illuminating. What are your qualifications? Been in the trade for 45 years, fitted for 20 years, and now I run the business.
Well, look at that. That's fantastic. Do you want to give the business a shout before I give you a round of applause?
It's a Hazelmere Carpet Company in Hazelmere.
What, did you spend a long time coming up with that name for your carpet company in Hazelmere?
It was a joint decision on the family.
I put it out to paid a consultant $50,000 for that. Did you?
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Call it Hazelmere Carpets. Yeah.
Hazelmere Carpets. Call it HS2. Can I ask you a slightly? And what's the best thing for cat wee?
New carpet.
Is it? Well, I'll
give you the number if you want.
You would say. I know a bloke in Hazelmere. Have a round of applause. Thank you, Mark. 12:26 is the time. You're listening to. I was asking for a friend on that one, by the way. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need if you want to join in. I know. Tim in Stourbridge points out, as a Kidderminster, as a son of Kidderminster, I should know everything about carpets, but I don't. Kidderminster, famously the carpet capital of the United Kingdom, and still has some manufacturing, but it's got a rather good museum. The Kidderminster Carpet Museum I would put on the list of things that you must visit if you ever find yourself in the area. But there it is, an absolutely brilliant answer to Frank's question. I love that. Tony's in County Fermanagh. Tony, question or answer?
It's a question. By the way, I had so many puns about carpets, but we'll leave them there.
I don't want to pull the rug from underneath you, but I think we've been amused enough, Tony.
I'll pile it on.
Oh, very good.
Right. My question is, I live in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, actually.
The north of Ireland.
The north of Ireland. Sometimes you have to get that right. But I'm actually from where your mum's from, because I do listen to you a lot, James, and you do speak about your mum, so I'm from there, but I married a girl over here. Anyway, the question. Yes. Over here, the name of the counties, when they actually in spoken word or in sports, they always refer to them as County Fermanagh, County Dublin, County Wicklow.
Yes.
Whatever you are, it's always counties. Even in the north and south, they prefix it with that. Why is it in England there's only County Durham?
Yeah, I like that. I was a sneaking sense that we've done this before, which is fine, because we're more than happy to do repeats on the programme, but I'm always a bit frustrated if I think we've done it before and I can't remember it.
Why is it not County Yorkshire? I'd love that. County Yorkshire.
County Yorkshire, County Worcestershire, County Shropshire. But it is, why is Durham the only... It's got something to do... Sometimes I start waffling, Tony. I don't know if you've ever noticed this. But I do it I do it for a reason. Because sometimes the answer just appears while I waffle. My memory kicks in, but it's not, it's got something I've got the word Palatine in my mind. Do you know why I've got the word Palatine in my mind? It could just be Star Wars.
I can only think of the Roman hill. Is there a Palatine hill?
The County Palatine, does that mean anything? County... It's not happening. It's not happening, Tony.
Okay.
It's not. So it's on the list. Why is Durham the only county in the in Great Britain that puts the county in front of the space, in front of the city or the area or whatever it is, and as opposed to the island of Ireland, where every county comes first? It is coming. It's just gone 12:29. Tony, you take care. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Right. So we're gonna make a committee decision, okay? Because it's nearly the headlines. Steve's got through, but I got quite genuinely squeamish when what was that lovely lady called who worked for the hospital, worked in the hand therapy? It was Gabby in Beaconsfield. I genuinely got squeamish when Gabby started describing the ribbon effect after a finger has been cut. I'm not going there. I'm quite funny like that. So Steve is the fella who lost pretty much his he lost all his fingers and they had to graft his hand to his stomach so that the skin would grow back. And he's got through now. I'm not sure I've got the stomach, and that's not a joke. I'm not sure I've got the stomach for his call, but he's now on hold. Luckily, it's time for the news, but during the news, can you let me know whether you think we should take Steve's call? Tim Humphrey has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:32, and it is close to unanimous that we will take Steve's call. John in Edinburgh points out you don't get over your fears unless you face them. Sinan is a bit less sympathetic. Take the blooming call, James. What's wrong with you? Take the call, says Vince. I was trying to get through myself to answer it based on my own personal experience, so I'd love to hear Steve's story. What is this? Some sort of dating site for people who've lost their fingers? And Joan, I beg your pardon, is closer to my position on this when she says, if you're going to take that call, should I leave my lunch until later? Let me just... Please don't read my name. I can't see why not, but I respect you. I lost 2 fingers over 30 years ago. And I can tell you this, the one reattached, you gain all the feelings as it heals. The one that I see what you mean. So one got reattached and one didn't. And the one that didn't get reattached, I can still feel. In time, it goes away. But because the nerves of the fingers are all tied up at the base of the hand, you get a lot of pain if you hit or bang your hand, even in what feels like the finger that isn't there. Why didn't you want me to read my name? Surely, if you're missing a finger, everyone you know has noticed. I can't. What, are you leading a double life? You're keeping a missing finger secret from your family, so you don't want me to read your name out? But anyway, I didn't read your name out. Steve is in Little Baddow in Essex. Go on, then.
Hello, James. How are you?
I'm very well, Steve. What happened? Just stay on the...
Do you want backstory?
Yeah,
or just
go on.
like...
Give me it all. Hit me with it.
Okay, so doing a bit of DIY like you do, table saw, being very careful, pushing it through one way, pulling it out the other, and then I finished doing what I was doing. I bent down to turn it off, and accidentally my fingers went in the wrong place. So yeah, I cut them off. I decided that I should drive. Yeah. Then decided that I'd be all right to drive myself to the hospital. Well, that didn't happen. I collapsed on the way to my car. Luckily, I had a friend working with me, helping me out, and he drove me to Broomfield
hang on a minute. What was your friend doing while you were saying, I'll be back in a minute, I'm just going to the hospital to get my fingers sewn back on?
He was running around turning off the generator and putting the tools away.
Oh, all right, yeah.
He was a sterling guy, though. He did go back and get my fingers.
He went back
to the hospital.
Yeah. So hang on. So what? He took you to the hospital and then he went back again to get the fingers.
Yeah. Well, yeah. They were roughly 8 meters behind where I was working. They went flying.
How did you forget them the first time? On the first time?
Well, I was a bit. My head wasn't in the game at that moment, to be honest.
Nor were your fingers. My head wasn't in the game at that moment. So your mate, what was his name? Can I ask what his name was? I think he did. So of course he's called Dave. So Dave, gets you to the Dave and Steve. What else is it going to be? It gets you to the hospital. A&E, straight. I mean, we're straight through. There's no hanging around. Yeah. And then the doctor says, "Have you got the fingers?" And you go, you look at each other and you go, "Oh no, I knew we'd forgotten something." Yeah. And so Dave goes, "Right, I've got." So he's straight back to get the fingers.
Yeah. Then they give me a tetanus.
Yeah.
And then I hyperventilated not hyperventilated. Had the what's it called? The shock where you crash.
Oh yeah. It will come to me in a minute.
Like when you have an allergic reaction.
Yeah, anaphylactic.
That's it, yeah, I had that, so, that was quite experience as well.
Poor thing. And then, so Dave gets back with the fingers.
Yeah, and then Mr. Sood, the surgeon, come and saw me and performed a 10-hour operation and told me he'd give me a semi-functional hand rather than throwing my fingers in the bin.
Good Lord.
Which is kind of what he's done. But my skin graft had to be done through sewing it to my stomach. So they cut a flap and put my fingers into my stomach and sewed them there. So I was really good at I'm a little teapot for a while. And then, they gradually just released them. And then I've had hand therapy for about 6-7 months after that. And now I'm having neurological waves, electrical pulses put down because I get a lot of tingling feeling, but it's all coming good with the feelings.
Absolutely incredible. Isn't it? Yeah. And I love the way... Mention the surgeon again. Tell me his name again.
Mr. Sood.
At the... what hospital would it
Broomfield
be?
Hospital.
Broomfield.
Broomfield Hospital.
That is absolutely incredible. What an incredible story.
Amazing team.
When did it happen?
February 23.
Okay. And it's an ongoing process, the rehabilitation. It sounds like things are getting better all the time.
Yeah. So now I go every 4 or 5 weeks to have the electrolysis thing to release the nerves from the scar tissue to give me more feeling and stop the tingling.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic. And now's Dave.
Dave's good, yeah. My son's working with him now, so yeah, it's all good.
That's fantastic. Steve, I don't know, it feels like, I think you have to get a... Yeah, of course you do.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
And you did, Steve.
Thank you, James.
Oh, thank you, man. And do stay safe. I
will.
Yeah, good. That's incredible. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. Who even knew that kind of medical technology exists? You kind of suspected it did, but straight from the horse's mouth. That's incredible. 12:38 is the time. James is in Gillingham. Gillingham?
It's Gillingham, James.
Gillingham, Dorset. Question or answer?
Yeah. It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
Not so far away, yeah. I'll be as delicate as I can about this. I live in the country, take a dog for a walk regularly, and I notice different herbivores produce different waste, in types. Like some produce pellets, some produce pretty messy stuff like cows, cow pats, and then the sheep produce pellets, I think, kind of like slightly bigger. And I'm wondering why that is. If they all eat the same stuff, basically grass, I would assume, maybe a little bit extra here and there. Why they produce such different types of waste?
It's the digestive system, isn't it? So I think don't rabbits go through? Doesn't it go through a rabbit twice?
You've got me there.
And a cow chews the cud, so they've all got completely different means of absorbing nutrients, which means that they're going to produce measurably different waste, and also water consumption as well. I don't know, but I like it. I mean, I don't want to sound weird, but I think about this kind of stuff a little bit as well, because carnivores and herbivores are completely different. Just in terms of the garden, I got a right old problem with the cat on my raised beds at the moment. And it's a shame that I haven't got like a pet donkey, because if I had a pet donkey and it was pooing in my raised beds, that would be good for the vegetables, wouldn't it? But it's a cat, and nobody wants a cat. Also, she digs up my radishes. It's driving me nuts. But so I mean, I think that's because they eat meat, so their waste is not organic in the same, or good for the soil. But why would animals that eat that only eat herbivores, as you say, why would they produce such measurably and visibly different waste? All right, I mean,
you may well be right on all of it. You sound quite an authority on it.
Well, a lot of people would say that, actually, James, that I am a bit of an authority when it comes to talking a word that Ofcom prevents me from saying live on the radio, but we'll find out. We'll try to find out. I like it, and it may be the digestive system. It may be that I was talking absolute nonsense. Take care, James. Thank you. 20-1 is the time. So we've still got the question about seagulls. We've done the fingers and the carpets, the seagulls in the counties, and now the poo, the waste, the animal waste. If you can answer either of those, let me know. Just to remind you, how does a seagull know that it's food? So especially if it's swooping in from a great height. Why is Durham the only county in Great Britain that has the word county in front of it, or even in it? And that question you just heard there, how come herbivores produce such markedly different wastes, and what happens? I mean, it's kind of asking how hard is it to fly a plane, but it's about what you do apart from takeoff and landing. What are the challenges of different routes? How does the job change according to the route that you're on? I think that's a better way of phrasing the question. I don't want to offend pilots. That'd be a really stupid thing to do. Chris is in Hove. Chris, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, Chris.
Hi. Well, you've got a question about poo, I think.
Oh.
So this is about we.
Okay.
So when I was younger and going out with friends, and we'd go out to a pub, or we might be on a journey somewhere and we were drinking beer, we'd always say, like, don't break the seal. So don't break the seal, because if you do, you'd end up going to the toilet every 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes.
And sometimes you'd have like 2 or 3 pints. And then as soon as you went to the toilet to break the seal,
You'd be in and out. You'd be in and out like a fiddler's elbow. Yes.
So what is the seal?
I mean, is it true? I don't know. I mean, would it have happened anyway? No, well, it might have happened anyway. We all think that we've started some sort of chain reaction by going the first time, but we'd have had to have gone at some point, and it wouldn't. You couldn't have kept the seal in place forever, could you? I mean, that would be insane and dangerous.
Definitely couldn't, but sometimes you'd probably hold on a little bit longer.
Is it a thing? Is breaking the seal a real thing? And if so, why? What is going on there?
Sorry to lower the tone, James.
Well, it was already quite low, but thanks to James and his rabbits. But that is the end of anything remotely scatological that we're going to be doing. That is the final question that even pays the vaguest attention to bodily functions. 12:43 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Nice one, Chris. Thank you. David is in Lancaster. David, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's an answer for you.
Carry on.
It's with regards to pilots, what they do during the flight, and how different flights of different types have different challenges and different procedures. What's going on? On all flights during the cruise stage of the flight, we'll be taking the weather for various airports, assessing weather on the route in case we have to do any diversions, and just planning a plan B as a sort of get-out clause in case anything happens during the flight.
Oh, yeah.
So we're always looking for a suitable airport that we can land at. But with regards to the differences in different types of flights, that can be very varied. And as the person who asked the question asked, what sort of differences are there? If you're flying over high mountains, such as the Alps and things, you will be wanting to prepare a different route. If you have, for example, an engine failure where the aircraft may slowly drift down from, say, 40,000 feet to 25,000 feet, you need a route that you can plan to fly with one engine that will take you away from those high mountains and keep everybody safe. And with regards to different airports have different categories depending on the difficultnesses and challenges and risks involved of going to them. So sometimes that'll involve just a briefing between the pilots before you set off. But sometimes if it's a more challenging airport, one pilot can only go there if the other pilot has been there more than a few amount of times. And in very, very challenging airports, there will be specific training given in a flight simulator so that you're absolutely aware when you get there of what the specific challenges are.
Absolutely first-class answering.
So, I hope that helps.
I know I say qualifications, you say I'm a milkman, but I saw it on the telly.
I used to be a builder.
Qualifications, David?
I am an airline pilot, commercial pilot.
That is such a beautiful answer, isn't it? You covered absolutely everything. Have a round of applause on me.
Thank you very much, James.
Do you know how some people have a telephone voice?
Yes.
Do you have a tannoy voice?
Kind of, yes.
Go on, can I hear it?
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're cruising at 37,000 feet at a speed of 350 miles an hour. We'll be arriving 10 minutes early today.
Hey!
There you go.
I love it. Thank you, mate. That was lovely.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:48. Mystery Hour continues. Questions that still need answers are the ones about the seagull. I loved that airport question, the pilot question, and oddly the carpet question was brilliant as well. Finger question probably in a class of its own today. But we still need the one about seagulls and how they know the food, and the one about counties and why Durham has the name county in front of it uniquely in Great Britain. And then we've got the question about herbivorous waste, and breaking the seal. Ian is in Bath. Ian, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's an answer regarding counties. And thank you also for being the voice of reason every weekday morning for me for the past few years.
What a lovely, thank you.
That's okay. So when counties were established, specifically in England, obviously we used to have kingdoms, and so certain kingdoms became counties in their own right, like Kent, Surrey, Essex, for example. But
Mercia became Worcestershire largely, didn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Other counties became shires, and they were named after the principal town that governed that area, and they were governed by a shiree. So that's why you have Leicestershire, Yorkshire, Lancashire, where I'm from originally. But Durham was a bit of an exception because it was they had more exceptional powers. And you were right when you said the word palatine.
Was I?
Cheshire, Lancashire, and Durham were palatines, and they had more important powers issued by the monarch to rule their area. And in the case of Durham, it was never governed by a shire reeve or sheriff, and we still have high sheriffs these days. It was controlled by the bishops of Durham.
Yes.
So it was never a shire. It's never been a shire. So I guess that's why it's become County Durham, as opposed to Durham Shire.
I love it. Qualifications?
I'm a bit of a geek, but I'm also the Deputy Mayor of Bath in the County of Somerset.
Well, and you have an interest in the kind of, what would you call it, municipal history?
Civic history, pageantry, yeah, all those kind of things, yes.
I'll do nicely. Deputy Mayor, are you hoping to get the big job one day, or are you quite happy being Deputy Mayor?
Well, I've got to serve 6 years as a councillor before I can qualify, so I'm quite happy to serve his worship at the moment. Cutting ribbons, yes, it's absolutely fine.
Well, you hang in there, Ian. Thank you for that. Have a round of applause.
Thank you so much, James.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words as well. 12:51 is the knowledge is just lovely, isn't it? You hear someone who really knows what they're talking about. It's just nice. Steve is in Walthamstow. Steve, question or answer?
Hello, James. It's an answer. I'm afraid I'm going to be talking poo to you. And after the last thing you mentioned, big jobs, I thought, well. So
let's have no more jokes and puns. Let's just focus on the question of why herbivorous waste is so different, despite the fact that the diet is identical.
Because what happens is most herbivores, certainly rabbits and guinea pigs and things, actually re-ingest their poo.
Yes.
Because of the sort of fibrous aspect to it. So they sort of re-ingest it to sort of make it easier to ingest. And then it's really just down to...
and that's going to be your pellet. The redigested one is going to be the one that finishes in pellet form.
And then it comes out, so it sort of forms into basically the ergonomically most precise way of getting it out again, really. So it stops it hurting too much, basically.
So it's going to be rectum-related.
Yes, but equally, you see, the wombat does a square poo.
I've heard this. I thought it may be an urban myth, or indeed a rural myth.
No, this is true. This is true.
A wombat.
Yes, so...
do we know why? Do we know the evolutionary reason for that? Makes them easier to store, I suppose.
I don't know why the wombat does this.
No.
I've just drawn a graphic novel all about poo, so I'm just so I'm remembering all this from this book we've just put out. So.
Well, I mean, you've answered my final question there, which is what are your qualifications?
My qualification is I'm an illustrator, and I've just drawn a book called Puka Adventures: Journey to Pootopia, which is a compendium on sort of why poo doesn't stink and why it's the most important substance in the world.
It's going to be very, very popular with children, isn't it? That's you.
Oh, my God. I did an event with some kids the other day, and I got to shout poo very loudly in a church quite a few times.
And they just loved it. They absolutely loved it.
They learn lots as well. My little neighbour came up to me and goes, "You the poo man?" I went, "Yeah."
Well,
he says, "I've read it 8 times," and he says, "and I know what an esophagus is, and I know how to spell it."
So it is one of those books that I mean, serves a very serious purpose in a very funny way.
Yes,
so you are Steve May. You are Steve May, and I claim my £5.
Exactly.
And you illustrated the book that James Turner wrote. So you and James have done this together. And indeed, you go for the pun on the cover, overflowing with facts.
Of course.
Well played. Have a round of applause on me.
Thank you.
No, thank you. What are you working on next?
I'm trying to sort of write a book about a cat who joins a rock band, but I've got a picture book coming out with Francesca Simon, who wrote all the Horrid Henry books, so that's coming out soon.
Oh, lovely.
As well.
Oh, top man. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for taking time away from your easel to fill us in on that. That was great. Chris is in Uxbridge. Chris, question or answer?
I have an answer, James, actually, and it's going from poo to pee, I'm afraid.
Oh, no, I'm going to get in trouble for this. Go on, carry on.
So going to the golden seal absolutely exists and is a real thing. And the rationale is that when you start drinking, you go out, you start drinking, your bladder is already fairly sort of, got a nice sort of contents of normal urine, I would suggest, in it. And so the toxins start to be processed by the body into your bladder. And as soon as you have that first pee, that gets rid of all of the diluted stuff. And then from then on, all your body is doing is trying to get rid of the alcohol, which is toxic.
Right.
So it doesn't matter
how, as soon as you sort of get toxins into your bladder, your body goes, right, I need to get rid of that. So you're peeing all the time after that. So yes, golden seal is a real thing.
And that's fascinating. And of course, once it's explained, as with so much on Mystery Hour, it begins to make absolutely perfect sense, doesn't it? Qualifications?
There you go. So I'm an ex-operating department practitioner in the Royal Air Force. Now I'm a medical support officer in the Royal Air Force. So not a doctor or anything, but... yeah.
No, more than enough knowledge to answer that question.
Fantastic. Medical training.
And you're in Uxbridge. I don't know how interesting this is, but I saw a boat the other day called the Pride of Uxbridge.
Yeah.
You don't sound very interested. It's not, is it?
How interesting. What sort of boat was it?
You're patronising me now, Chris. I thought it because it was like it was like like highway maintenance, but on a canal. It was like a canal maintenance boat.
Right, yeah. Well, there's a lot of canal boats going through Uxbridge.
Well, that's why I thought you'd be interested in knowing about the Pride of Uxbridge, but apparently you're not.
Well, no, I cycle down the canal rather than to the pub rather than...
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, you have a round of applause on me, that's fine. Just trying to bring in some local colour, that's all. 12:56 is the time. Speaking of local colour, mixing God's own town of Kidderminster. Mick, question or answer?
Oh, God's own town indeed, kid.
There aren't many seagulls in Kiddie.
Oh, loads.
Yeah, go on. What's the answer?
Well, the answer it's learned behaviour with the gulls. It's as simple as that. They watch mum and dad when they grow up, and they look at healthy gulls, and they see, there's an healthy gull. What's he doing? He's swooping down, grabbing chips, plenty of food. So they're foraging optimally,
and they've got a good enough eyesight to know.
I've got good enough eyesight
to know to know what a chip is.
Yeah, and if they're you watch pigeons at a railway station or on the street picking fag ends up, don't you?
Yes.
So they're picking fag ends up. If pigeons spend all their time picking fag ends up, they're not picking food up. So that's got a negative effect on their survival. They're wasting energy.
Yes.
Picking fag ends up. The same as if gulls spent their time, they couldn't recognise a bit of plastic from chips. They're swooping down, picking bits of plastic up and then tossing them away. They're wasting energy, so that's a negative effect on their ultimate survival. And of course, then those traits that they possess, if their ultimate survival is less than other individuals, those traits don't get passed on to the next generation.
Fantastic. I mean, it's all there, isn't it? I mean, there's a bit of Darwinism there to end Mystery Hour with. What are your qualifications?
God bless Darwin.
God bless Darwin, exactly that, and all who sail in him. What are your qualifications?
Bog standard birder for 50 years, amateur ornithologist.
No such thing as a bog standard birder. We've had this conversation before. You've offered up these qualifications before, haven't you?
I don't think you asked me last time I was on about my qualifications, but we talked about migration, didn't we?
Yeah, and I was. I mean, what are the top spots for bird watching in the Kidderminster area?
That's it. Yeah, that's right. You was on about geese, weren't we?
I was sending you up to Hurcott. I thought that you get some nice wading birds up in the big pond at Hurcott, don't you?
Oh, I used to work for the local council, and we used to man the management of that site.
So it's a beautiful spot. It really is. Is it owned by the Ministry of Defence? Did they own it, or someone like that?
It was privately owned up until 90-something, and then the local council got hold of it.
Right.
Repaired a lot of the damage.
So I think I saw a heron last time I was there.
You will have done, and great crested grebes and lots of other species.
I got a sedge warbler in Norfolk last weekend.
Lovely.
Tiny little thing, not that rare, but very hard to spot. Anyway, have a round of applause on me, Michael. Lovely stuff. Oh, Lord above, I've got to pick a winner. It's Steve, isn't it? Will Steve be all right playing Mystery Hour with his new hand? Well, we'll find out. Steve wins the Mystery Hour board game. That's it from me for today. If you missed any of... I'll be back tomorrow, don't worry. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and the new LBC app, where you can read and watch the latest from LBC. Put your news categories in the order you want, as well as pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. Download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4. I do not know whether Gemma Collins will be joining him again today. There's only one way to find out, but Sheila Fogarty is with you now.
James O'Brien on LBC.